What's up, nerds? It's Havoc. And today we are completing our tier list series in faction overview with the DAK, the Deutsche Afrika Korps. Man, we've got a lot of material to go through. Again, we're not going to pay too much attention to the time. We're just going to do what it takes to go through every unit, every battle group, and also some of the nuances of DAK and some of their mechanics. I'm definitely going to touch on as well. And the key here is to be as informational as possible. So, if you you find things that I've left out, feel free to throw those in the comments for people that are going to stop by this as they're exploring the DAK as a faction. Starting commentary about this faction right now, it is definitely, from my perspective, it is probably the most difficult to execute at the highest level. They have a handful of very, very strong units that definitely have the faction kind of propped up, from what I can tell at the moment. And anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So before we start in the tier list, I'm just going to do similar to I did with my previous videos. We're going to be referring to the Halftrack Call-in or reserves deployment systems throughout the video. This is going to be something that we're talking about regularly, but we're also going to touch on the Armory and the Armory upgrades. We'll be going through all of those. The headquarters is going to be referred to as Tier 0, Light Support Company as Tier 1, Mechanized as Tier 2, and Panzer Army Command as Tier 3. So, with that, we'll start off with the units. So talking about the bike, this might surprise a lot of people, but executed at the absolute highest level right now, the bike is effectively the make or break unit for DAK. It's right at the top of the strong category, bordering on OP. And what makes the bike so strong is it offers combined arms. It is a very cheap, very fast, early territory capturing unit, and the Vet 1. The Vet 1 is crazy, has a crazy snowballing effect in the early game if you can get it to Vet 1. And the longer you keep it alive, the better, because it's basically going to carry you to your first set of vehicles and make your infantry perform at the level that, frankly, you need them to in order for you to remain competitive throughout the early game against your opponents. In smaller games, like 1v1s and 2v2s, we don't see as much of the 250 because it is pretty easily chopped up by the British dingo. It is highly susceptible to the dingo, and generally not fast enough to escape. So if it's ever caught out of position, it's pretty obviously going to die. But in the case of the bike is much faster, a lot more maneuverable, despite having some pretty questionable pathing at times. But the bike is much more readily going to be able to escape the dingo and other threats compared to the 250. So cracking it open here, I actually want to quickly compare for you guys. I was thinking about this, like, why would someone take the bike over the 250? And I just wanted to showcase, like, the bike has very decent damage at each range over the course of the early game. And when you stack that on top of the combined arms bonus, really how you're using this unit, it should be engaging. It should be participating in every engagement with infantry at the beginning of the game. Combination of the shared veterancy, and then once it gets access to the Vet 1, it's just going to really snowball engagements in your favor and allow you to create that early game advantage that you need to build momentum to get into your tier 1 and 1.5 units that are going to help you scale into the DAK mid game, which can be pretty impressive if executed correctly. So keeping the Krad alive for the same reason is like paramount. It's probably the most important unit to keep alive for any faction at the beginning of the game. And generally with DAK, like if you can avoid losing units, it's kind of like a must do. It's rarely worth it to trade units with the DAK. And that's because a lot of them don't scale amazingly. We'll talk about the ones that do for sure. And they are usually very expensive to replace. And when you lose them, they leave very significant gaps in your roster. Anyways, so this is the Krad DPS. We'll just compare it here to the 250. So you can see here the 250, much better damage at close range, but as it has a much steeper curve that falls off at the longer range, the bike is much more consistent across the into the mid-range section. But the 250 is going to be better at close range, which probably isn't a big surprise to you guys. But I did want to call that out. So we're putting the bike in this strong category because of the utility in the early game, the capture pressure that it provides, and then the strength combined with the Vet 1 passive. I'm actually just going to pull it up on screen. We'll break open the unit card here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Crad. There we go. So you've got the self-repair. Now, quick note about the self-repair. This self-repair is incredibly slow. I don't know why it's so slow, but it has been made so. And what I was talking about in terms of the passive is the tracer marking. So the tracer marking makes targets 15% easier to hit. So how to think about this from a mathematical perspective is the way that this game calculates whether or not you're going to hit a unit is it takes the accuracy of the unit across various ranges, and then it multiplies that by the size of the unit. That's why you'll notice like infantry, they never miss vehicles because they all have unit sizes over 2. And as long as the unit size is over 2 and the infantry accuracy is over 0.5, then of course you're not going to end up with a value less than 1, which means you're gonna hit it 100% of the time. And then it just becomes a question of whether or not it's going to penetrate. Why I'm explaining this is because what hitting a target with tracer rounds does, to my knowledge, is it basically makes that 1 multiplier bigger. So it makes it to like 1.15, right? So think about your probability of hitting a target with a Panzergrenadier at far range, okay? Right now, it's actually less than 50% chance that you're going to hit it, right? But if you multiply the what is it? I think it's like 0.465 here, and we do that by 1.15, now we're actually over the hump of having a higher probability of hitting the target. So it's actually increased to 53% chance that we're going to hit them at long range. So you can see how this is going to have a significant snowball effect on your ability to hit the designated targets by your Krad. And that's really what you want to be doing in the early game. You want to focus on burning down the individual and especially like the highest priority units, the infantry squads, with the combination of your bike and whatever other squads you have around. I can't really put it any other way. Like DAK is best leveraged and utilized in a blobbing environment. And that is actually part of the reason why they struggle so much in 1v1s at the moment, outside of a handful of battle groups, which we'll talk about. But it's because they require, quote, the term we've been using recently is tactical force concentration, which is just a bigger way of saying blobbing. And, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that this is the case, but between the combined arms mechanic and then you stack on top of it the tracer rounds of the Kradschutzen, that is really what is driving the incentive to do this. Now, something also worth mentioning about the bike that a lot of people don't realize is that it gets support veterancy, which means it shares experience with allies. So when you, and this is why I was saying with the Kradschutzen in the early game, you want to make sure that you're participating in as many engagements as possible with the bike. Because not only is it getting veterancy from its own damage, it's also getting veterancy from the damage that your other infantry units are dealing. And this is what's going to allow you to get to the Vet 1 faster and help you start snowballing those engagements. So using the bike as often as possible, I see a lot of people use the bike to just go and capture the outskirts of the map and focus on fighting with their infantry. That is a mistake, okay? You need to engage your bike in your engagements in the early game because of the combined benefits of combined arms passive given to the infantry squads that it's near. And then eventually the veterancy and the tracer marking ability is going to make a huge difference in your early infantry engagements. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so with that, for that reason, we're going to put the bike in the strong tier. I debated putting it in OP. The reason that I didn't is because this thing is still very susceptible to being caught out and killed very easily. The pathing on it is still very questionable. The maneuvering is like not very intuitive, and I lose the bike a lot due to the poor pathing and the poor, I guess, terrain traversal. That basically it's the pathing. It's the pathing that really messes this thing up. If it had a reverse button, 100% of the OP tier, no doubt at all. But you know, because it is in the state that it's in and it's a little bit finicky to maneuver, we're just going to keep it in the strong category. Panzerpioneer. As far as engineer units go, these guys are pretty good. There's nothing super special about them. I will say, like, compared to other engineer units, they actually are better in combat. Between combined arms and the fact that they're a ranged unit, like with a rifle weapon rather than like a short range weapon. Because if you think about the other engineers, you've got Americans, which have the grease guns. The Wehrmacht has the Pioneers with the MP40s, and the British have the sappers with the Sten guns, right? So they're the only non-doctrinal engineer unit that has a rifle weapon, which, especially with combined arms in the early game, makes them really effective at kiting those engineer units, and usually beating them in like a 1v1 situation if you catch them at max range. The Panzer Pioneer will win most of the time. So a couple drawbacks about the Panzer Pioneer. I actually want to pull them up here so I can show you guys. For some reason, I still don't know to this day why their sweeper is more expensive. I think it's because it gives a little bit extra HP per second with the support or the advanced hazard removal package. To my knowledge, like, I think the other minesweepers or the other support packages, they give like 2.5 HP per second. And this one gives 4. So it significantly increases the repair rate of the Panzer Pioneer. In case you guys didn't know, the base repair rate of an engineer unit is 8 health per second. So this increases it by 50%, which is pretty substantial. So that is pretty nice. They do also have a better capture multiplier than other engineers. Some other engineers. The American engineer definitely has the worst one. But the Panzer Pioneer has a decent capture multiplier as well. They also have access to the Flammenwerfer upgrade. I think they are probably the best with this out of the engineer units. They retain a lot of their mid and long range damage from having 3 Kar 98s still in the squad. And with combined arms and this flamer, I feel like they beat most engineer units. Again, as long as they're starting by engaging them in the open at long range. Then you've got the GRB. This got some really significant buffs in the last patch. I'll actually pull it up on the DPS calculator so you guys can see the difference. Essentially, the main differences with the GRB are that now it does more damage to units that are in cover as a starter. Oh, can I not? There has to be a grenade launcher weapon type, right? Maybe not. That would be very surprising to me. Huh, okay. Maybe we don't have that weapon loaded in here. That would have been a nice addition. Okay, well, I mean, comments about the GRB. Essentially, much better at dislodging garrisons than previous patches, for sure. It also does extra damage to units that are in cover. So that's something you want to be mindful of. Like, hitting blobs is always going to be the priority, but then if you're comparing hitting a unit that's in the open versus a unit in cover, the GRB is actually better at dealing damage to units in cover because they are clumped up, of course, but also because it actually gets a damage bonus against units in cover. It also unlocks the smoke rifle grenade ability, which I think is pretty heavily slept on at the moment, because DAK actually doesn't have any super early game smoke deployment options, and you can get that as early as tier 1 on the Panzerpioneer to kind of help you deal with machine guns or other team weapons, which can be really helpful as well. Yeah, besides that, we'll talk about combined arms a little bit later as a passive, but here are the stats associated with combined arms in case you didn't know. And they also have access to this stun grenade, which I wanted to call out as well. The stun grenade is really nice because regardless of how many squad members you tag, to my knowledge, like the ones that are, if you tag any member of the squad, I'm pretty sure that more of them are affected. From what I've seen, like, it slows them, and this also, I've seen this also trigger on retreat for units. Like, if a unit retreats and then gets hit by the stun grenade, the slow continues to, like, it continues to slow them down, which is kind of crazy. I think this is a bug, honestly. It kind of needs to be fixed. But something definitely worth using. Definitely worth the munitions. As far as grenades go, it's relatively cheap. And the stun effect lasting over 10 seconds, like, this will flip an engagement on its head almost as a guarantee for the Panzerpioneer, as long as you hit the squad with it. Yeah, plunder. We'll talk about all this stuff a little bit later as well. Now, as far as their structures go, I believe, yeah, there's nothing special about their barbed wire. We'll talk about reinforced barbed wire when we get there as well. So Panzerpioneer, as far as engineer units go, they're definitely in the strong tier. I also want to call out, like, I've seen some pretty impressive strategies with, like, GRB into espionage blobs. It's pretty disgusting right now. I've experienced it myself. I've seen it in team games. Hopefully, like, what I'm hoping for is a broader rework of the Espionage Battlegroup, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, that is definitely a very effective way to use these units at the moment. Next, we have the Panzergrenadier. So Panzergrenadier is actually a very strong line unit. In terms of their scalability and strength, unit for unit, they are probably up right next to sections in terms of strength. Sections, I actually think, scale into the OP category, especially in the late game and with training. But Panzergrenadiers, with combined arms, with veteran squad leaders, and the MG34 upgrade, this is a very capable line unit. They were struggling a lot on previous patches due to their inability to access combined arms without building a 250, which often killed your tempo in your composition. But now, with the bike now providing that combined arms passive, Panzergrenadiers are a very capable line unit. So these guys have come quite a long way. And I do want to call out why the Panzergrenadier is so good specifically compared to other line units as well. So I'm going to pop them open here, and we're going to pull up also the MG34. So first, let's compare them to riflemen really quickly. I just want you guys to see the difference here. So as you can see, riflemen start out with a DPS advantage. They both fall off pretty hard at long range, but Panzergrenadiers have the slight advantage. And then you'll notice if I bump another squad member into here through like something like a veteran squad leader purchase, it puts me right on par with riflemen. And it actually makes them even better out to just a slightly closer range, they start to overtake riflemen, and then riflemen are a little bit better at 25, and then Panzer Grenadiers get better again. If you stack combined arms bonuses on top of this, it actually makes them even better than that. And this is part of the reason why they're so expensive. They get some really, really nice bonuses, and they scale really well. Again, their main issue has to do more with their cost. And a bit of the struggle that they have in the early game, like prior to getting veteran squad leaders, you can see, you know, they are at a bit of a disadvantage. If we compare them here to sections or a Tommy squad, I always forget it's called Tommy. You can see they're actually losing pretty badly to Tommies in the long range category, but if they manage to close the gap, get within about 20 meters range, then they are going to be winning those engagements. And same is true even if you add in veteran squad leaders, kind of the same situation. Now, I bet a lot of people didn't expect this because obviously, you know, based on the weapon type that they have and comparing them to the Wehrmacht Grenadiers, a lot of people actually have no idea. Here, actually, let's compare so you guys can see. A lot of people had no idea that even though these two units are using the same weapon, they function very differently based on the unit. I actually think this is a deliberate design choice by Relic because I think they knew that with the combined arms bonuses and move speed and all that stuff that combined arms offers to the Panzer Grenadier, if they gave them a long range damage profile, same as the Grenadiers, they would actually be like way too oppressive because you could just move them at max range, and then when your opponent started to retaliate properly, you could just back them away. And so by giving them more of a mid-range damage profile, basically what Relic wants you to do is commit a little bit harder to your engagements to basically give your opponent a bit of an opportunity and a window to make some decisions on how they're going to engage you, because your infantry is faster than theirs with the combined arms bonus. So that's a quick little insight, and I think a really important thing to call out, because intuitively you would assume that these units perform about the same, but they are actually quite different in terms of their profile, and you can see that from here. The other thing I want to call out specifically about the Panzer Grenadier is the MG34 upgrade. So I believe it's this one. Yeah, okay. So I want to compare the MG34 to a basic Kar 98 so you guys can see how this affects the Panzer Grenadier's damage. So you can see the MG34 itself has a lot of damage as an individual weapon. We're looking at close range, it's double, and at long range, it's 6 times. So it's basically as effective as another full squad of Panzer Grenadiers, but it's even better concentrated into a single weapon. Another thing to call out, a core difference between the Kar 98 and the MG34 is the MG34 doesn't have as good moving accuracy as the Kar 98 does, or other weapon upgrades in this category. So let's do like I'll compare it to like the Breda. This is also an option that's available to the Panzer Grenadier if you go the Italian Combined Arms Battlegroup. But you can see the moving accuracy multiplier on the Breda is much better than it is on the MG34. It's a 50% debuff, and on the Breda it's a 70. Sorry, it's a 50%. This is a 25% debuff on your accuracy while moving. So this weapon is much better and more effectively used while stationary compared to moving. Now, obviously you guys intuitively knew that, but a lot of people don't know that the penalties are different depending on the weapon that's being used. And the MG34 is best when stationary. So important thing to call out. The other reason why this is important the other thing that's important to call out about the MG34, and most weapon upgrades, when you think about it from a damage distribution perspective, okay? The reason why the weapons like the MG34, the Stoßtruppen MG42, by the way, we'll pull that up actually. Let's do that. Let's pull up the Stormtrooper MG34 so you guys can see the comparison. Now, MG42 is significantly better. Not really surprising. considering the stage of the game that it comes out in compared to the 34. But you can also see suffers from the same multiplier that the MG34 does. So both are much better used in a stationary setting. Now, the reason why these weapons are so powerful, Bren Gun will do the same thing. The reason why these weapons are so powerful is because the damage is concentrated into one squad model at a time. It means that as your opponent is engaging you, you are basically DPSing one squad member at a time consistently and dropping squad members more consistently and faster than they're going to with like 2 bars or 2 recce scoped rifles or 3 scoped Lee Enfields or whatever. The less weapons you have and the more concentrated the damage is, the more you're going to drop models on your opponent's squad and reduce their damage more quickly. That's going to lead to more winning engagements for you. It's kind of the same principle of like just engaging, with more numerically with more troops versus less troops. But by dropping squad members more quickly, your Panzer Grenadier is going to snowball the engagement faster, and that's why prioritizing munitions on spending for this MG34 upgrade is so worthwhile. Really quickly, we'll just compare it here to the Bren gun. Now, the Bren is definitely better at long range. You can see the Bren gun is a little bit better. The Bren gun cannot be fired on the move, unlike the MG34. But with training and then with the section Vet 1 bonus, the Bren gets way scarier in the late game than the MG34. So just wanted to show some comparisons between the MG34 and some of the other line unit high damage single target weapons. Now, Panzer Grenadier. So we're putting them in the strong category. Very versatile line infantry, gets great bonuses from combined arms. DAK has been performing really well this patch, and I think it's very much tied to the performance of the Panzer Grenadier as a reliable line unit. Where this unit struggles is in the early game without the combined arms bonus, or what I like to call emotional support. Panzer Grenadier needs a vehicle buddy nearby, otherwise they fold to pretty much every unit in the early game, including riflemen, including assault engineer squads, including Tommies, sappers, you name it. And this is why it's so important to make sure that your bike is engaged in those early game engagements. Or if you're playing in a team game setting and you are using the 250, using that in combination with your Panzer Grenadier is super important. And that brings us to the 250. So I'm going to talk about the 250 in the context of, I'm actually going to break it into two. So the 250, this is without the armor upgrade. This is going to be with the armor upgrade. For everybody that skips to the end of the list, they're going to be like, why the hell is there two 250s? And so really, like, fundamentally, the main issue with the 250 itself in the early game is it has pretty paper thin armor and it doesn't have a massive health pool. I kind of like hesitate to put this in average. I honestly think it's more bad. I think it's more of a liability prior to the half-track upgrades, and I also kind of have some feelings about the half-track upgrades, like how late they come out, how expensive they are. This unit is kind of meant to be like a staple of the DAK roster, and honestly, at least in a 1v1 setting, I will say, like in a 1v1 setting specifically, I have been doing much better without them than with them. Because they're super easy to lose to a dingo in the early game, or even just like a concentrated amount of small arms fire. They're pretty paper thin and easy to kill. Yeah, they're very difficult to keep alive in the early game. Now, once you upgrade them, they become strong. The armor upgrade, the extra health that they get, it really gives this unit what it needs to be competitive into the late early game, we'll say. Being able to resist one snare before getting engine damage is really nice as well. And obviously, what I love about the 250 and what is super underutilized, especially in the lower elos that I see, is the 250's utility with the medical options. So the 250 has the medical station healing upgrade, which it can use at any time, like pre-Vet 1 as well. And this is fantastic for like juggling your troops in combat in the early game when you're using a 250 is so important. And trying to minimize the number of model losses, paying attention to the individual the health of the individual squad members that are in your squads as you go through a couple engagements in the early game, using this medical station to get the maximum value in the early game is so important to maintaining a good front line and making sure that you're not getting pushed off the map. And this is even more true in team games, because in team games, if you're forced to retreat in team game settings, like your troops have a long walk back to the front line. And so that's why it's so important to use the 250 to absorb damage and to also keep your troops topped up in terms of health. And that gets made even better when the onboard medics, which is the Vet 1 passive they get access to, comes online. Being able to kind of juggle your heals between individual squads by getting them into the onboard medics passive, and then if you have a group of squads that need healing, using the medical station, this can be the difference between like building a lot of momentum in the early game with DAK and getting forced back to base and just being in a really tough position. So medical station and onboard medics, I think, pretty underutilized and definitely something to pay attention to as you're using your 250s in the early game. Similar to the bike, these guys also get a passive of support veterancy. So they are getting experience from not just their own damage, but damage of the units around them. A lot of people kind of forget about this as the game progresses, but like, man, keeping a 250 near a Flak 88 or a Pak 38 or machine gun teams or artillery pieces all contribute to the veterancy of the unit over the course of the game. And this unit actually gets really good if you can get it to Vet 3. 30% harder to hit means it's dodging things left, right, and center. So it makes the target size smaller, which makes it easier to avoid AT gun rounds, tank rounds, etc. 80 extra health, and it becomes a mobile suppression platform that is pretty much on par with the MG34. So with your half-track upgrades, you can actually like use this thing in the late game at Vet 3 as a mobile suppression platform to support your troops. And it's super valuable. It's basically, it turns into an MG34 on wheels, which is excellent. So like I mentioned, once you get the armor upgrade, this thing is very strong. The important thing is just making sure that if you're going to build the 250 of the early game, you're very careful with it, and you make sure that you get access to your armor upgrades pretty much as soon as possible so that it can come online and be much more active. That takes us to the 259. 259 in its current state feels kind of average to me at the moment. There is a lot of early game anti-tank options for allies to kind of lean into that counters this pretty badly. And I just feel like these things don't have quite enough room to play and be super useful. They also lose, I'll pull up the 259 here in just a second. So they actually lose their onboard medical station, which is unfortunate. And it's kind of counterintuitive to use this unit with something like basically anything that's not a Panzerpioneer. It's kind of counterintuitive to use with this unit because it loses DPS when the squad gets out, because it gets a damage bonus when it has a squad inside. You can see here the autocannon fires 0.75 seconds faster when there is a squad garrisoned inside. I've seen some people use this to really great potential where they're like super active with their Panzerpioneer in the early game. Maybe they lose like a couple models and the squad goes down to like 1 or 2 guys. And then they pretty much just keep it inside the 259 for as long as possible to get the extra damage bonus. And by not reinforcing the squad, they're saving themselves a little bit of manpower as well. Sorry, I've been yapping. Needed a drink. So, the 259, I mean, this is a great tempo builder in the early game, especially if your opponent has an ultralight vehicle, a dingo or a jeep. This thing can easily dive and take out. The long-range damage on it is pretty good, and it has really good synergy with the support armor battle group's superior fire drills passive. The extra 100% on the machine gun damage is really nice on this unit. But overall, you know, I feel like, honestly, a lot of the time, I do feel like I would rather save the munitions for something else and just keep the 250 as it is with the shared veterancy, which it actually loses as well if you go for the 259. It no longer has the shared veterancy option. It also loses the onboard medics if you upgrade it. And so it just loses like a lot of its utility. And unfortunately, I feel like the DPS that you get from it, considering how close you will be to something like the Flakvierling, I just think it's not really worth it. It has a really limited window to be very useful and is pretty investment heavy for low return as far as I can tell. So I put it in the average category for that reason. 250 mortar. As far as mortars go, the 250 mortar is really solid. It's quite strong. Obviously, having it in a mobile setting in a vehicle makes it much more easy to use in a reactive way compared to a mortar team, I guess you could say. Something to call out about this, like, these things are much quicker, not just in terms of their mobility, but also because they don't actually have to set the mortar up in order to fire, which means your time on target is much quicker than a mortar, even if both units are in range. Because oftentimes, like, the mortar team will have to pack up, set up, face a certain direction, and then fire, whereas like the 250 is much quicker to acquire and fire at its targets. And so for that reason, it is quite good. I'll actually pull it up on screen here so we can look at the unit in a bit more detail. Where are we here? We need the mortar. Mortar. Not that one. Give us the mortar half-track. Here we are. So you can see on here the various abilities. Now, you have access, obviously, to a high explosive barrage. You have access to the smoke barrage, which is really nice and underutilized. And the incendiary round is absolutely perfect for dislodging a team weapon that's in a strong position or being a real nuisance. And it also does decent damage to structures or emplacements if your opponent happens to have those as well. Throwing an incendiary round in with a high explosive barrage will dismantle most of those early game allied emplacements, like the HMG bunkers, specifically is what I was talking about. So as far as mortars go, this thing is quite strong. It's probably, next to the American mortar, it's probably my favorite, largely due to its mobility, and the Vet 1 ability on it is also very nice. But drawbacks, it's very expensive, right? You have to build a 250, you have to buy the half-track upgrades, and then you have to spend 60 munitions in order, 75 munitions in order to upgrade into the mortar half-track. So it's quite an expensive unit for what it does, and I find this to be a big barrier to DAK's like early game indirect options, because the earliest that you can get this thing out is like 5 minutes, and if your opponent is spamming machine guns, which I'm seeing a lot of right now, it kind of proves to be a sticking point and an issue. So that's essentially it for tier 1. You can see there's pretty much everything in the tier 1 section of the DAK roster is in a good spot. you know, it contributes, I think, to the DAK early game to being quite strong as well. As long as you have enough units on the field, I feel like they have a very competitive early game now, and especially combined with the bike. Where you will start to struggle with DAK's early game is if you do not build any vehicles and you're just building infantry. If you're playing against like an American player and he's building riflemen and he recognizes that you've built no vehicles, like if he just runs his units into yours, you will lose for sure. That's why you need the combined arms passive, you need the mobility, you need the accuracy, you need the received accuracy bonuses as well in the early game to stay competitive. So if you're not building a vehicle in the early game, honestly, you may as well play Wehrmacht. If you just want to build Grenadiers and you're not building a single vehicle for the first like 5 or so minutes, then you're missing out on probably some of the best parts of the DAK's early game roster. My inclination is like, if you don't like the 250, and like I said, in 1v1 settings, I don't really like the 250. I think it's more of a liability in many situations. So if you're like me in that case, even in team games, I would opt for the bike. The bike is much cheaper, it's faster, it's got scalable utility throughout the game with the vision, the mark target, and the ability to capture territory and gain experience from it. So I would recommend the bike if you're not comfortable using the 250, but the 250 options are decent as well, as long as you're investing in that half-track upgrade from your armory post tier 1 construction. Which brings us to tier 1. So in tier 1, we have the medical truck, assault grenadier, MG34 team, Panzerjaeger, and then in tier 1.5, we have access to the Flakvierling, the infantry support gun, and the PAK 38. Starting with the medical truck, I mean, as far as healing options go, I kind of wish that DAK had like a constructible base focused medical option, similar to like the Wehrmacht bunker or the American medical station, or even the British version that just offers a little bit of just healing in the base and no casualty collection. This is the most expensive of the medical options for all factions, and it's the only one that DAK has outside of using the 250s, which is pretty micro intensive stuff, especially to do if you're keeping it in the base. And the truck being the only other option is rough. I am going to put this in average because relative to the other medical trucks, actually, you know what? I mean, if I think about the Vet 1 passive, it's pretty close to strong, but I'm going to keep it in average. And the reason why is because this thing is so susceptible to being killed. Let me actually just put them side by side here so you can see the difference. I want you guys to see this, dude. It's so counterintuitive. What is this unit called? My apologies here. What is the DAK medical truck called? Truck. Utility truck. Where is it? This one. Medical. Yeah, 2.5. Okay, let's do that. 2.5. No. Medical. No. Truck. No. Where is this unit? I'm gonna have to search for it like this. Where is it? Where are you hiding, Mr. Medical Truck? It has to exist here somewhere, right? Maybe not. 222. Is it this one? No. That's not it. Can't be it. Okay, well, I guess it's not in here. Unless it's this one. But I don't think it is. Someone in the comments is going to roast me for totally missing this. No, this is not the right half-track. Okay, well, the point I was getting to is you can see that it has 160 health. You compare that to the bike. The DAK bike has 185 health. Okay, so this thing is insanely fragile. It will get one shot by an AT gun. If this thing eats a snare, the snare does 120 damage. It's very easy for squads to finish off with small arms because the armor on it is so bad. So this thing is like super easy to kill. And Relic, if you guys are listening, like if you're gonna do this to DAK like this, it's their only medical option. Okay, they don't have a base version, and if you're gonna do this to them, like at least make all the other medical trucks the same. You know, the American M3, the British CWT truck, like they get super durable, and the DAK one just gets shafted. Now, obviously, the DAK one benefits from the upgrades, right? But it doesn't get deployable smoke, and it only gets another 120 health, which brings it up to like 300 in total, which is, or no, 280 actually, which is like insane. So, yeah, I think they need to kind of be more fair and like, see, you're like comparing it to like, we'll look at the 251 here. Like you can see, gets 80 health at Vet 3, starts with 320. This is a beefy unit, you know. This thing becomes very, very, very tanky. And the DAK one is just it's pretty sad right now. So it could use a health buff, I think, and or nerf all the other. Honestly, I would sooner see them nerf the rest of the medical trucks across the board if they're going to give the DAK this kind of treatment. Now, upsides of this unit, field supplies. Oh my gosh. This is the best aura ability on any, I think, any support truck type unit or half-track type unit. This is the best. It gives your units 20% speed, not units, squad specifically, so infantry only. And this also applies to team weapons, by the way. 20% speed, 10% rate of fire, and 10% accuracy. And lasts for 45 seconds after leaving the aura. The best way to get this is to park it near your support weapons. You don't want it to be on the front line because you risk it getting one shot by an AT gun. So you don't want it to be engaging and getting XP like that. But it does get support veterancy, same as many of the other units that we talked about. So parking it, you know, just behind kind of like your Pack 38 or a howitzer that you happen to have, or infantry support guns, whatever the case is, using this nearby those units will allow it to get to that Vet 1. And once it gets Vet 1, man, this passive is absolutely excellent. This passive is super, super good. So that aspect of the DAK truck definitely makes it exceptional. I would have dropped this way lower than average if it weren't for that passive. Like I would probably put this in the bad category and like say it needs help. But what I would like to see is DAK having a base-oriented option for medical, and the truck. I mean, I'm okay with the truck being as fragile as it is. Honestly, with the Vet 1 passive, I've kind of changed my mind. I'm putting it in strong. The Vet 1 passive is so good. And as long as you can keep your truck alive, which frankly can be difficult to do if your opponents are hunting it actively, then you know, getting that Vet 1 passive is really going to help you scale into the late game with infantry that you don't really have a lot of late game options, and we'll talk about that later too. Assault Grenadiers. I love this unit. This is one of my favorite units in the game to use. I love this unit. I want to talk about this unit in detail. So I'm going to pull up their unit card. So if you just use these guys like a line unit, like a Panzer Grenadier or something, kind of march them around, you know, try to walk them into your opponent like you would with like a Ranger squad or guards or something like that, you're going to get terrible results. They're absolute garbage if you try to do that. But when they are used with the half-track, the combination of combined arms and assault disembark passives make them an excellent assault unit. Like this is the best. This might be the best unit in the game, especially in the early game, for creating space, because basically how you want to use this unit is, what I love to do is, if I'm planning on building a Panzerjaeger for anti-tank, I like to build that first, and then I actually use my 6-minute half-track Call-in to get the Assault Grenadier. The reason why I do it in that order is because the Assault Grenadier costs 300 manpower. And if I build it from the, does it show the cost? There it is. It costs 300 manpower, same as a Panzer Grenadier. But if I build it with the Halftrack, it comes for 275, and I get the Halftrack with it. So it's really, really nice like that. So generally how you want to use it is you want to be really careful with the 250 that you're bringing. Basically, as soon as the 250 engages in combat, that's when you want to disembark your Assault Grenadiers and close the gap using the movement speed and the 15% damage reduction. And then you basically have the entire window of this 15 seconds to use the free grenade assault ability, which is really nice because it allows you to close the gap, maybe like fight a little bit. And then if your opponent like starts to reposition or they don't, then you can use the assault grenades to try to either pick up like a really good wipe or force your opponent out of a position. And having access to the grenade assault for free on a continuous cooldown, I mean, obviously this ability itself has a cooldown. I think it's like 60 seconds or maybe it's 120 seconds. I'm not sure. But being able to continuously use this with an assault disembark, it's going to save you a lot of munitions over the course of the game. And honestly, like that is really the way that you're going to get these guys vetted up the best is by hitting some good assault grenades. Because the MP40s themselves, like they don't do exceptional damage. They will beat most units 1v1 with this assault disembark. But as the game progresses and you start facing up against some of the later game assault units like Rangers or guards, like vetted guards, even Canadians, like these guys kind of start to struggle. They don't scale super well. But in the early and mid game, like they're great unit to create space, to flush out team weapons, to smoke things, to get on top of machine guns and flush them out. There is really no better unit for doing that in the early to mid early game than the Assault Grenadier Squad. So I'm a big fan of these guys. I would just say that if you're going to use them, make sure that you're using them with the 250. And that reminds me, I actually kind of forgot to touch on something else. I also want to break open and talk about the Vet 1 passive for the Panzer Grenadier. A lot of people are sleeping on this right now. The Mechanized Advance bonus. This weapon accuracy turns these guys into absolute Terminators. The capture speed is also very nice, but the weapon accuracy is super nice. And I'll give an example of like a composition that I might use in a standard game later on. But a lot of people, Relic really buffed the tank riding mechanic in this game in the last patch. So they made it much quicker to embark on top of tanks and much more accessible. And a lot of people are not using this the way that they should be, especially with DAK, okay? Because DAK, both the Panzer Grenadier, so this Vet 1 Mechanized Advanced passive, and the Assault Grenadier Assault Disembark, both benefit from tank riding. So as the game progresses, if I'm playing with a 250 in the early game and then I lose the 250, God forbid, then I'm kind of in a tough place with my Assault Grenadier. But a great thing to do is if you've played tier 1.5, moving into tier 2.5, using the Stug as kind of like your transport, loading the Assault Grenadiers on top of the Stug. And if you go into, like, for example, you engage an opponent's AT gun, the Stug by itself is already pretty threatening. But if you stack a squad of Assault Grenadiers on top of that, there's no way that AT gun is going to stick around, right? So I really love the passive. I really love the interaction between the tank riding mechanics and the embarking mechanics for DAK. And that also plays into the power of Mechanized Advanced. Another way to trigger this, guys, is you can, once you get the Vet 1, just by getting this unit into the medical truck and getting them back out, you will trigger this passive. So whether you're riding your tanks around using the 250s or embarking inside of your truck. Now, obviously, don't use your medical truck with the Assault Grenadier passive. That's a fast way to lose your medical truck. But using these mechanics is integral to getting the most out of your infantry with the DAK. So if you haven't thought about it, really make sure that you pay attention to it in your future games, and you'll see the results show in your infantry performance will be much, much better. So Assault Grenadier, I am going to put them in the strong category. When used correctly, these guys, like with the Assault Disembark especially, these guys are excellent at creating space, being aggressive in ways that it's more difficult to do with some of these other unit combinations in the early game. The Assault Grenadiers are perfect for flushing out your opponent's team weapons, like I mentioned, clearing up buildings, defensive positions with the Assault Grenades, all really nice. And the rest of your forces can easily follow up on the openings created by these guys. So I'm a big fan of them. MG34. As far as machine guns go, this one might be one of the worst. I will say, like, it has some benefits for sure. We'll crack open the unit card and talk about it in a little bit more detail. But as far as machine guns go, I'm kind of inclined to put this in the average category. It is probably a little bit, I mean, it cannot duel the Vickers. I don't think it can duel any machine gun. But actually, like, from a DPS perspective, I actually think this one is quite good, especially for units that are in cover. Now that could be like my bias, or just like my personal experience. But let's just compare the MG34 to the MG42 really quick here. Oops. 42 team. Here we go. Yeah, so you can see the damage of the MG34 is actually quite close to the 42. The main difference that you're going to notice between these two has to more do with the suppression than the damage, because the damage on it is very solid. But the suppression is going to favor the MG42 because of a significantly better rate of fire. So if you look at the RPM on the 42, you can see, so it's about 25%, no, maybe 30% higher about than the MG34. So as far as machine guns go on the damage side, like, this one is very solid. I will say, like, unless you're playing something like Italian Defense Battlegroup, I've been leaning away from using machine guns. Just because obviously with DAK, like, mobility is king, and the ability to be aggressive is really, really important as well. And the MG34 kind of lacks that. There's nothing really special about it from like a mobility standpoint that would make it more synergistic with the rest of DAK's roster. But there is absolutely a time and a place to use this machine gun. And actually, I'm kind of thinking, like, maybe this should be in the strong category. But I'm just trying to think about it in the context of, like, the broader roster and how it fits in there. And the more I use this unit, the less I kind of like it. Just based on how it fits into the broader DAK roster, like I was mentioning. Like I said, definitely a time and a place. And if your opponent is blobbing, this is a great option to help you deal with that. And even better, so we'll talk about it a little bit. We'll revisit this unit when we come back to Italian defense. But in and of itself, like, I'm not a huge fan of this. And so I am going to put it in the average category, I think, is where I'm going to settle. I'd say high average, like bordering on strong, but still probably average. Okay, that takes us to the Panzerjaeger. Now, I'm talking about the Panzerjaeger, specifically the Panzerjaeger with the AT rifles. So not the tank busters. We'll revisit the tank busters later when we talk about the new Panzerjaeger Command Battle Group. But I want to talk about the Panzerjaeger specifically. As far as handheld AT units go, this one might be one of the worst. There are some definite strengths to it. But for the cost, and I will say, like, I'll give Relic some credit because they did really help the scalability of this unit in the last patch. Here, let's crack open the unit card so we can talk about it. They really help the scalability of this unit. Like once it gets to Vet 3, it's actually quite solid. It's actually a very, very solid unit. But prior to that, it's really more of an AT deterrent, like an anti-tank deterrent than a tank killer. You tend to need at least 2 of these to be really threatening to any light vehicles, which is probably okay, considering how early you can get them out. But overall, like I'd say I'd probably put them in average, but as they scale and get into Vet 3, we'll look at their veterancy really quickly so you guys can see how much better they get. So at Vet 3, they get extra health, extra damage, and range, which is really nice. The range is the best part by far. This will make it so that they cannot be kited. Originally, when AT rifles were built into the game, they all had, what was it? I think they all had 40 range, the same as vehicles did. And so it made it impossible for vehicles to kite these AT rifles, and therefore made vehicles like really difficult to use. I remember like when the game was released, people were just using Tommies with the boys rifle upgrade, and they were just spamming like 6 or 7 squads of Tommies with the boys rifle. And at that time, the penetration of the boys rifle was a lot better, and it was a lot better against infantry. So you can imagine it was just absolutely brutal to deal with those. Anyway, I digress. The range on the AT rifles brings that back to a degree because you're getting the extra range that's going to bring you up on par with most vehicles' maximum range at 40. So that is really, really nice. The 20% damage is also nice. So it takes the damage per volley from 100 up to 120, which is what a tank shell does. But that's also contingent on penetration, and Relic did a nice job of giving them a little bit of rate of fire and also weapon penetration to help them scale a little bit better. Parts of them that are still not great, the anti-tank tear gas round, I don't really know, like this is the shortest snare in the game. I don't really know why they made it 3 seconds, but like you compare this to like the guard snare, the Canadian snare, pretty much every other snare is a minimum of 5 seconds, and this one is 3, and I don't really know why. So I feel like the snare time needs to go up on this a little bit for it to be considered a lot better and more useful, frankly, because right now, most of the time, I kind of feel like it's a big waste of munitions. So Panzerjaeger, gonna go in the average category for now. We'll come back to it. And then, I mean, I don't feel like I have to talk about this unit too much. I feel like a lot of people are experts on it at this point, and it will be no surprise to anybody that the Flakvierling is in the OP category. As far as like the weaknesses of the unit, maybe maneuverability is probably one of the weaknesses of the unit. The fact that it is best used with rear facing, which makes it a little bit more difficult to micro compared to other units. But like, I'm sure that everybody who's played this game and played against DAK and has the experience firsthand of dealing with the Flakvierling knows how oppressive this thing is. The combination of the suppression and the area of effect damage that this deals makes it a absolutely dominating, might be the best light vehicle in the game, actually. I think I can say that. Let me think really quick. We've got like the Greyhound, we got the Stuart, the Carl. I just don't think anything stacks up to the damage potential of this unit in the early game. The Flakvierling is absolutely devastating. Now, couple of things to call out about the Flak and how to use it specifically. I think I need to go to my DPS thing here and make sure that this is true. Yeah. Okay. So, I believe the burst duration on the Flakvierling while moving is shorter. It's a similar, so I talked about this in my American video about the heavy weapons battle group when I talked about the quad. The Flakvierling has kind of the same effect where it will have a shorter burst duration, shorter and lower accuracy when firing on the move. And then of course it also doesn't get the what's it called, the suppression effect if it's moving. It doesn't get the suppression effect if it's moving. So generally what you want to do is be parking this thing at maximum range, screening it with your infantry, and using it to suppress oncoming squads. Once you get Vet 1, you can make some really, really nice plays to pin down your opponent's light vehicle and set them up for kills with like anti-tank weapons or AT grenades, or even just like, you know, just unloading the armor piercing into ammunition into like a Greyhound. The Flakvierling can beat it in a 1v1 situation with at least a minimum of the smoke upgrade. It needs the smoke upgrade for sure. Now, how the armor piercing ammunition works, and a lot of people kind of get this mistaken, is it's a stacking slow. So you can see here, it slows vehicles on penetrating hits by 10% for 2 seconds. This slow stack. So what that means is when you are chasing vehicles with this unit, because the burst duration is lower, you're actually not able to slow them down as much as if you just close the gap, get into range just enough that you can get a full burst off that's going to slow them all the way down. That's going to give your infantry, your anti-tank weapons a little bit of a window to catch up and try to help get the finishing blow on whatever light vehicle you happen to be. Well, it doesn't have to be a light vehicle, it could be any vehicle, but whatever vehicle you're suppressing with this armor piercing ammunition, just make sure, I mean, if possible, obviously sometimes you don't always have the opportunity, but if you can manage to stand still and get the full burst duration off from the Flakvierling, you'll notice it'll slow your opponent's vehicle down a lot more. And that's what creates those openings for you to close the gap with your infantry, throw in a snare grenade, or set up a quick AT gun. Maybe bring up a Marder that you had in support of the Flakvierling. But anyway, I did want to mention that to you guys because, again, another example of a half-track unit much, much more effective when stationary than on the move. So that's the Flakvierling. Unsurprisingly, in the OP category, I mean, the ability to just burn down squads, output crazy damage, and suppress them at the same time just makes this unit, honestly, it's a huge crutch for DAK right now. Once the other light vehicles come out from allies, like, they would struggle a lot if it were not for this unit. And because it exists, I think that's a big part of what's contributing to DAK's really strong win rate on this patch. How to nerf this, it's really hard for me to say, honestly. I think honestly, like, the main issue from what I can tell is how effective it continues to be against units that are in cover. Like, I still see it suppressing units in cover or dealing really good splash damage. If they could find a way to fix that so that you could mitigate a lot of the damage by being in cover, or, well, specifically green cover, where you're like hiding behind something, some kind of wall, sandbags, whatever, that would be really good for I think the usefulness of this unit, and making sure that you're using it just for pinning down units in the open rather than using it to just burn down everything. But this unit, if you're not using this unit today with DAK, you are playing at a massive disadvantage. This is maybe one of the best units in the, it's definitely top 3 at least units in the DAK roster. We'll talk about the other two that I'm 100% sure are some of the best units in the DAK roster, but the Flakvierling is 100% up there. If you were wondering, like, if you like to play tier 2 or tier 2.5, I have been experimenting with a strategy where I am going Flakvierling. So tier 1.5, I build my Flakvierling, and then I get tier 2 up and I go into Stugs. And what that does is the Stugs frontal armor creates lots of like really great opportunities for me to be more aggressive and in the face of my opponent. It also allows me to kind of synergistically protect my Flakvierling by having the Stug on the front line, absorbing all of the enemy pressure from like anti-tank guns and armor. And the Flakvierling could do the work from the back line. This thing has no issues hitting things at max range. One of the things I also wanted to point out Was where is it? Yeah. So look at this, guys. Look at the RPM at max range. You can see it's actually got a higher rate of fire at max range than it does at mid and near range. Why that is, I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, apparently that has no effect on the DPS curve because of the relative accuracy values. But like the fact that the RPM is higher at max range, I don't know. That just, to me, that spells like more incentive to use this thing at max range where it's going to be the most safe and easy to protect. Sorry, back to the list here. So Flak, yeah, so I talked about tier 2.5, and then going Stugs, supporting it with Marders, and then slower transition into tier 3, completely fine. Don't need to lean completely into a tier 1.5, and obviously by getting more vehicles like the Marder, maybe the Stug, the 254, your vehicle upgrades are going to pay even more dividends as you have those in your roster relative to the team weapon options from tier 1.5. And Fergie also used this build in the tournament games in the finals to beat out Hulk Smash in his DAK games. This was the composition that he used. He used the Flakvierling into the Stug D. So it's a really, really nice pairing, and I would definitely recommend trying it out if you haven't. That brings us to... Oh, I need a sip. All right. That brings us to the infantry support gun. And it's bad. It's not good. It's not good. It was good. It was excellent. Maybe 3 patches ago, 3 patches ago. I'm not sure. They all kind of start to blend together. But basically, this unit and the pack howitzer got nerfed pretty significantly in the last few patches. The AoE damage profile, the accuracy, the reload rate, and the cost were all nerfed. Classic Relic, right? They love to pull way too many levers when they're making changes to units and trying to balance them. And this unit kind of ended up in that group. So the infantry support gun, I would not recommend generally right now. If you like the infantry support gun and you want something similar to it, I could recommend the Tonne. The Tonne is kind of just like the bigger brother of the pack howitzer. It does come out later, but there is a way that you can kind of beeline your way to it at 5 CPs and get it relatively early and still kind of have the same effect. But it is also a little bit more expensive than the ISG. But I can't recommend the ISG in its current state. What I would really like to see from these units is better barrage abilities or reload rate, potentially, to allow them to function more as a light artillery unit than they currently do. Right now, they just fire too slow and do too little damage and cost too much. So not a great indirect option for DAK at the moment, unfortunately, and for that reason, it's in the bad category. This takes us to the Pack 38. Now, I'm going to talk about the Pack 38 within the context of like not talking about synergy with any other battle groups, just by itself, okay? The Pack 38 is pretty confident it is the worst AT gun in the game. The worst like medium AT gun. I don't know how else to describe it, but basically like all of the equivalent AT guns. Here, we'll put up the M1 as an example. AT... Here's the Pack 38. Give me the American AT gun, or even the 6-pounder would be good. Give me the 6-pounder, 57 mil. So comparing these two guns, you can see. Oh, actually, is that right? Yeah, there we go. So it has the lowest rate of fire relative to the other AT guns, but only by a little bit. You can see it actually has the M1 AT gun has slightly better near rate of fire. It also has penetration values. It actually looks to be almost just as good. I was gonna say worse. Now I think it could be, the reason I'm thinking this is because allied mediums, the Sherman specifically and the Matilda and the Grant, they all have slightly higher frontal armor values than like the Panzer IVs and the Panzer IIIs do, so they tend to bounce more shots. So I may be a little bit wrong. I guess I could say anecdotally, I feel like this AT gun is the worst, unless you're using some kind of battle group augment, which we will talk about later. And I guess also you could say, like, when you're going for the AT gun, unless you're using one of those battle group augments, generally I think the Marder is probably a better choice, because the Marder is basically just the Pak 38 on wheels. And obviously it's going to benefit from the vehicle upgrades like your other vehicles do from the DAK Armory. The main, I would say, difference between obviously the firing arcs of these two weapons are different, and when the Pak 38 is set up, you can actually get more shots off and potentially hit targets more frequently at long range compared to the Marder, which may have to rotate or adjust the turret in order to fire follow-up shots after the initial. So yeah, I am going to put the AT gun in an average category as far as AT guns go. Also the Vet 1 on it, I'll show it up here just so you guys know what it is. It's a, I believe it's an armor debuff. Yeah. Okay. So reduces the target's armor by 20%. Now this is a very interesting interaction because it's not local. It's not, what am I trying to say? It's localized to the unit, which means that anybody that's shooting at this unit gets the benefit. So it's kind of weird because, like, there are units that, and abilities that provide bonus penetration against enemy vehicles. And this kind of does the opposite, but through the same mechanism. It reduces the target's armor. So this could be really good when you're setting up to isolate a target and are planning to go for the kill. And it's a heavier tank, obviously. So you're not going to want to use this on something like a Crusader or you know, something with relatively light armor. You wanted to use it on the heavier targets, the Churchills, the Matildas, the Pershings, the Bulldozers. This is when you want to be using those. But yeah, it is pretty expensive for what it does, I would say. And generally what's going to happen is when your opponent sees this, they're usually just going to back off to avoid, you know, taking further penetrating shots. And like I mentioned, it is also quite expensive. So as far as the Pak 38 goes, like as like AT guns themselves, it's fine, it's passable. But again, I think more broadly speaking, thinking about the DAK roster in its entirety and how it fits in, I think the Marder is a much better fit just for the mobility options and then also the scaling with the vehicle upgrades. That takes us to the DAK 8-Rad. So I'm going to position this and by also kind of comparing it to the Flakvierling. The 8-Rad is in a weird spot because at the moment, it is the same cost as the Wehrmacht one, little bit expensive on the fuel side, comes out later than the Flakvierling, but it also does less damage than the Flakvierling does, and it doesn't offer suppression. So it kind of seems to me like the game it's just a way better choice to go with the Flakvierling because the 8-Rad is similar to the Flakvierling but kind of worse in almost every way. Now, some nice things about the 8-Rad that I want to educate you guys about because a lot of you guys don't know about some of the... I see, like, at lower elos, I just see a lot of people just kind of not knowing and forgetting about abilities completely. And I want to call a couple things out for the 8-Rad. So... here, let's actually put them, maybe we'll put them side by side and just kind of get them how they would deal with an infantry squad here. We'll do rifleman first. So you can see here's the damage against the rifleman, right? Decent damage out to, you know, a reasonable range. But then if you compare that to the Flakvierling, you can see here the Flak, like maximum damage much higher. And also... the Flak has a much better AoE profile. You can see the AoE radius here is 2. And then I believe the 8-Rad is like 1 or 1.5. Oh, it's 0. Okay. I think it's like 0.5 or it's something really low. Oh wait, no, it's because I'm looking at the MG34. Silly. There we go. AOE radius 1.25. So less AOE than the 8 rad now, and you can see here also if you compare the damage, like because of the AOE effect, the Flakvierling is just much better. It also, once it gets Vet 1, it's much more competitive with other light vehicles than the 8 rad. The 8 rad is kind of soft countered by everything from the Greyhound and above. It will lose against the Greyhound, the Stuart, the Chaffee pretty handily, whereas the Flakvierling can actually defend itself with the AP rounds. And so for that reason, it kind of puts this unit in a weird spot where it's like kind of difficult to use, and it's not as competitive as something like the Flakvierling. And you can see from a cost perspective, it's almost the same. We've got 260 and 50 versus I believe the Flak is 280 and 50. There you go. So yeah, I tend recently... Oh, it also takes up more pop. That's interesting. I didn't notice that. That's very interesting. It also... yeah, that is super odd. Are there any benefits? I would say, yeah, moving accuracy, to be expected. Moving accuracy is better on the 8 rad, so it is better at chasing down squads and going for the wipe. In a team game setting, it's going to be more difficult to do this because by diving into your opponent's line, you're also exposing yourself to their teammates. But in 1v1s, this can be pretty good. So overall, like the 8 rad, like I feel very like meh about it. Like it's average. I think it could use a little bit of uniqueness or identity change, especially from the Wehrmacht 8 rad. I would like to see it be a little bit different in some way. Maybe lean more into the aggressive elements of DAK and give it a different Vet 1. Speaking of Vet 1, what it is this commander mode. So it kind of transitions the 8 rad into a recon unit, and then it also gives units around it reload speed and accuracy. If you manage to keep your 8 rad into the late game, transitioning it into this utility unit is excellent. What you can do is integrate it in with your other vehicles and use it for the reload speed and the accuracy to get more out of your heavier units like your Panzer IIIs, your Stugs, your Tiger, your Flak 88. All of those units are going to benefit from the commander aura that is given by the 8 rad. So if you have your 8 rad alive in the late game, and this is also, kind of speaks to the importance of keeping units alive throughout the game, it's a great transition into utility unit. And you can also see here, it gets very, very nice bonuses at Vet 3. Becomes very, very powerful. So 8 rad overall not bad, but just really dramatically outshined by the Flakvierling, who pretty much does everything the 8 rad does but better. But the Flak doesn't have that late game utility outside of like anti-aircraft capabilities, but the 8 rad has that, which can be really nice. That takes us to the Marder. So generally the Marder, like, I think your opinions on this might vary depending on whether you're a team game player or a 1v1 player, or, well, big team game or small team game player. In 1v1 and 2v2 context, this unit is very average. But what I'm seeing in bigger team games, especially in mass, is these are definitely in the strong category. When you can afford to invest the munitions in your vehicle upgrades and get these guys in big numbers, they get pretty beefy, which is great with the vehicle upgrades. They also have access to the smoke, which is really nice. But they do really lack maneuverability, and they are... I like using these less than I like the Wehrmacht Marder, despite the Wehrmacht Marder being much more fragile. I really like the Vet 1 better on the Wehrmacht Marder, and I like the sight main gun ability on the Wehrmacht Marder better than this. I think these things, but they are solid. Like, they are very good in their own right. I am going to pull up the cards so we can take a quick look at them. So penetration on them is really nice. I'd actually like to compare them to the Pak 38. We might do that here. Let's do the Pak 38 and the Marder so we can compare. I'm really curious. I feel like the Marder has so the Marder has better penetration, much better penetration than the Pak. but the pack has better accuracy. Okay, so I was talking about situations that might be better to go for like the pack over the Marder. One of them is if you're fighting US half-tracks in the early game. Half-tracks have a very small target size, and so the Pak 38 tends to the Pak 38 tends to hit them better than the Marder does in the early game. And so for that reason, the Marder, like, it can be a bit of a liability in the early game to try to build it against something like a GMC, especially before you get those vehicle durability upgrades. The pack might be a much better choice if you're facing those, but obviously you're going to be susceptible to the barrage. So if you're thinking about going into the Pak 38, you might want to consider one of the Battlegroup augments that's going to benefit your packs over the course of a longer game. But overall, you can see here, the Marder, much higher penetration, obviously going to be more mobile than an AT gun, but not amazing mobility. And then it also has higher rate of fire. You can see here too, slightly higher rate of fire on the Marder. So these guys, exceptional for dealing with Churchills, Matildas, anything that's like a big, slow, heavy tank that you can screen against. The Marders are going to help. I really like building these things in a minimum of pairs, like at least 2 of them, because if your opponent decides to get really aggressive on you and you only have 1, it becomes really difficult to actually threaten a kill on the diving vehicle without a second one. Generally, they can close the gap and start circle strafing you before they die, which is not something you want to be dealing with the Marders, because their rotation rate is abysmal. And so, yeah, I'll put the Marder in the strong category overall. That takes us to the 254. So 254 is interesting. It's in a pretty decent position at the moment. The utility, obviously, of this unit is the best part by far. I do feel like the barrages in their current state are a little bit lackluster. They don't have great scatter. There's not that many shells that drop. And so for how expensive this unit has become as of the cost nerf that it got in the most recent patch. Now, it did get some recon buffs, but it also, like, the nerfs to the barrage ability and then the cost increase, I find it kind of hard to justify building this, especially when when this comes out, I'm not that far away from a much stronger artillery piece, which we'll talk about later. But for the purpose of like the map hack type ability, by the way, for those of you that feel like your Axis opponents are cheating, if you see them playing tier 2 or tier 2.5, there's a good chance that they just have this. This thing has massive detection radius. Massive, like huge. Like maybe, I think it's 80 range. I should probably refer to a Tightrope video where he'll give us the exact stat. But I think it's about 80 range of detection, which is bananas. And yeah, the utility of the barrage is not bad. Just a quick side note about this unit. What I would really like to see from it is something to the effect of the American... what is it called? The cache, the ammo cache, or the supply cache. I would love for the 254, especially in lockdown mode, to have the same effect as the supply cache, or something similar to that. It would give it a lot more excellent, like, scaling utility throughout the game. And would really help it, like, I think, be more effective of a unit in the late game as well. And the Axis don't actually have any of those kind of like rate of fire or like reload rate augments like the Allies do, outside of the commander mode from the 8-Rad. Which, by the way, the commander mode on the 8-Rad also affects the reload speed of artillery units as well. So keep that in mind. But yeah, overall, 254, not bad, not exceptional. For the purposes of recon, really, really good. But I think like the barrage abilities could use a little bit of work, or maybe some like late game utility ability would make this like a really strong unit. In team games, I'll be honest, in team games, this is probably strong. This is probably strong in team games. It's easier to get because whatever gaps in your roster you're experiencing, your teammates can help you fill. But in smaller game settings like 1v1s and 2v2s, it is oftentimes hard to justify this over getting another vehicle that you can be much more active on the field with. So I'll leave it in strong category, as I have a feeling that the majority of the audience is probably a team game favorer. And so for that reason, I'll keep it in the strong category at the moment. The Stug D. The Stug D, definitely strong. I think across all game modes, this is probably true. From 1v1s all the way up to 4v4s. The frontal armor on this thing is just exceptional. The gun on it is pretty good. I think what would make this unit even better is like a more distributed damage profile. Also, the behavior of this unit is probably its biggest weakness. And I've mentioned this to Relic before. The fundamental issue with these casemate vehicles is that they don't have the ability to rotate the vehicle chassis and adjust their turret at the same time, which creates these weird interactions where it's like you're driving your vehicle into range and then your opponent, realizes the danger. They start to move, and your vehicle starts like trying to traverse the turret, like either up or down or left or right, because it wasn't able to do it on the way to the target, and it increases the amount of time to impact for whatever shell that you're trying to fire. And this is very predominant behavior with the Stug. Obviously, this is mitigated by the Stug's Vet 1 ability, but it is kind of frustrating to use before you get access to that Vet 1 ability. So something to kind of pay attention to. But overall, the scaling veterancy on this, I do want to call out a couple things specifically about the Stug. So let's go over to the Stug unit card here. The Stug D here. So the Stug D gets bonus armor at Vet 2 on all facings. Front, back, and actually I don't know if it's rear. Front and sides for sure. Front and sides for sure. I'm not 100% sure about the rear, whether the rear gets the plus 40 armor or not. But the armor is really nice because at long range, it actually bumps allied AT guns from a probability of penetrating, so over 50% chance of penetrating at long range, to under 50% by this extra armor that it gets. And that is really nice for the Stug, because obviously it means that you have you're much safer against things like AT guns, and you can be much more aggressive on them, especially once you get access to you already have it at this point, but the veteran ability allows you to kind of like trade with those AT guns at very long range. And I also mentioned the Stug is the perfect mid-game option for getting and making use of your embark bonuses in the mid-game, because if you think about it, I'll go back here to the tier list. No other unit in the DAK roster besides the 250, you can't ride any of these units besides the 250s or the Stug. And so the Stug is the perfect way to get those benefits for your infantry if you've lost your 250s, or if it's at like a point in the game where it would be too dangerous to try to use your 250s, and maybe you want to keep them back to scale them up to Vet 3 and use them as machine guns or whatever. The Stug is really perfect for that, and the synergy between like having the assault grenadiers or the panzer grenadiers ride these things into combat, and then having the Stug kind of like bring them in, take the first shot, and then getting the disembark bonuses for both of those troops is really, really great synergistic relationship. And I think it speaks again to the Stug's great utility and strength in the mid game. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Stug. I also talked about how I've been doing compositions that include both the Flakvierling and the Stug D, and I think that it's in a really good spot. It's a strong unit overall. The repair and recovery vehicle. I'm not using this a lot. It's probably a lot better in team games where you've got a lot more vehicle wrecks to recover or salvage, and you can get great value out of this. In a 1v1 and 2v2 setting, I'm not using it a ton, but I imagine this to be like a perfectly average vehicle for what it does. The only counterpart that I'm aware of is the American version from the Armor Battlegroup. So this is kind of something unique to the vanilla DAK roster, which is really nice. It repairs faster than a Pioneer squad, for sure. And also the ability to salvage wrecks without having to lean into like something like the Armored Support Battlegroup or something like that is really nice. So overall, like this vehicle, you know, perfectly average, I would say, at what it does. Does it get any special abilities? Let's take a look together. Let's see if we discover something together. What is it? It's the... there we go, 18-ton Halftrack. I don't think there's any special abilities on it per se. Yeah, nothing crazy about it. You'll notice like repair rate here is double an engineer repair rate. So there may be some situations that it just, if you're floating a lot of fuel and you're considering maybe rebuilding a Pioneer, consider whether the Halftrack would be better for the purpose of repairs on your vehicles. And then also, you know, salvage and recovery, highly underrated, I think, especially in a team game setting. You know, if you manage to like scoop up one of the American or the British vehicles that like dove too far and kind of convert it over to your roster, get your armory upgrade bonuses on it, it could be really nice. So I imagine in a team game this probably sees more activity than in the smaller games, but it definitely has a place and has some great utility in it as well. So overall, decent unit. The 88. The 88, as far as heavy AT units go, this thing is definitely strong. I kind of feel like a lot of the towables and other emplacements right now are suffering from artillery, and I don't really know what to say about that. Like, I don't think it's an artillery problem. Honestly, I think the problem has more to do with towing. I just think towing needs to be made better and more accessible. I know they've been working on it, but like I just don't think it's in a place where it's like easy enough to use and set up these units to get the most out of them. But obviously, you know, heavy AT gun, anti-aircraft as well. Anti-aircraft capabilities are pretty subpar, I would say, just because it's super low rate of fire, and the rotation rate actually makes it so that like if your opponent, for example, calls like a recon barrage on this thing, it can't shoot it down before dying, which feels really bad. So I would like to see maybe the anti-aircraft capabilities buffed, honestly, like across the board, but especially for units like the 88. But great scaling on this thing, quite beefy considering, I mean, it does take a lot of commitment to kill with artillery units, but it is very doable. Double bishops will take care of this thing pretty easily. But if not, like, I mean, it's got great range. It is offers 360 degrees of rotation. Great penetration, and the Vet 1 ability on it is really nice as well. I'm just going to pull that up here. So the Flak 36 actually has this target engine ability, which causes engine damage regardless of the target's health, whether it's at full health or no health. Or below 50%, I should say. It will cause engine damage, which is really nice. And it is probably like the best ability on one of these heavy anti-tank guns. And also, obviously, the ability to get 360 degree rotation is really nice when you compare it to something like the 17-pounder, which has to be set up and faced, or the American M5, the 3-inch gun. The Flak 36, doesn't have to deal with that, and is a very, very effective anti-tank unit. Just have to be a little bit careful of the artillery and the call-ins, the bombing runs, etc. Those are artillery drops, call-in artillery, etc. All that stuff. This thing is very susceptible against. Now, if they make towing a lot better, this could be an S tier unit. Like, it could be super, super good. But the main issue with it right now is that like it can be difficult to get out of situations. A quick tip for this, actually, that reminds me. A quick tip for this is, so it comes in with a truck, but a 250 is way better with this thing for towing it around specifically, because the 250 is much more maneuverable than the 2.5 ton utility truck is. So if you have 250s alive, use the 250 for actually towing this thing around, and just keep the truck nearby for reinforcement purposes and medical purposes. try to use the 250 for towing this thing. You'll get much, much better results by using the 250 over the truck. So Flak 36 strong. Panzer III. Panzer III got some significant buffs this last patch. The machine guns were improved pretty significantly to be brought kind of up in line with the American, the Sherman. They scale decently with their vehicle upgrades. But as far as medium tanks go, I mean, it's still pretty close to the bottom of the totem pole. For the most part, I do prefer Crusaders, but with the vehicle upgrades, these things do actually outscale and outperform Crusaders in the late game. So they are quite good now. I feel like the P3 is finally in what I would consider the strong category for a unit. I think, you know, in swarms, they're just as dangerous as they were before, if not more so, because the machine gun bonuses, the main gun damage on them isn't great. And I actually think that, like, if you compare main gun damage versus infantry between the Crusader and the P3, I actually think the Crusader is better because it has a higher rate of fire and a little bit more concentrated damage, or maybe it's more accurate. I can't exactly tell. I can't feel out exactly what the difference is, but the Crusader does feel better than the P3 does in that context. But the P3 now is like overall like a very respectable medium tank. So really happy with the buffs that it got. I do want to talk about really quickly the new Vet 1 ability. So this was confusing to me at the beginning because of the verbiage, but the P3 Vet 1 ability and the P4 Vet 1 ability are actually different, but not in ways that you would expect. And I'll show you what I mean. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, it is this one. Okay, so the P3's ability is a 50% bonus rate of fire for 15 seconds, which is really nice. Now, this one, wait, is this right? No, this has to be wrong. Okay, I don't know if Relic did this. I don't know if this is a bug or what, but I am pretty sure that this description is incorrect. Loki, I'm actually going to load up the game in the background and test it because I didn't expect to do this, but I actually think this description might be incorrect. I'm pretty sure the P3 and the P4 have different versions of this ability. I think the P3's version is one that actually affects the rate of fire of the unit at Vet 3, or not at Vet 3, with using the Vet 1 ability, and the P4 actually affects the mobility of the unit. But we're going to find out right here. We're going to figure out what nonsense is going on. Because I am pretty confident that they are not the same. But I could be wrong. Let's find out. We're finding out. We're learning things together. Yeah, so my inclination was that the P3's drawback is speed, and the P3's drawback is rate of fire, and the P4's drawback is speed. So let's look at the difference here. Where's the P4? This one. There we go. We'll give you both Vet 1. Okay. And then we'll use the Vet 1 on both of these. So this is focus fire. You can see speed and rotation is down after the 15 seconds. This one actually gets, no, it's the same rate of, yeah, it is different. Okay, the description on the website is wrong. Okay, I was right. All right. We're good. I'm not crazy. I thought it was crazy. So this gets a reload debuff after the duration is finished. The Panzer IV gets a mobility debuff after the duration is finished. This is an important distinction. Basically what that means is the P3, after you engage in combat, you want to get away. With the P4, you probably want to start getting back into a defensive position before this triggers, because otherwise this mobility debuff is going to get you killed. The P3, if you manage to get chased down, like, you're going to be at a major disadvantage because your vehicles are going to be firing half as fast as they usually do. And that's why you want to make sure that, like, you're capitalizing on the 15-second window that you have to do the damage that you want to. and then backing out to wait for the cooldown and wait for the debuff to come off. Okay, that's cool. Wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy about that. Now, yeah, P3, we kind of talked about. So machine guns are very respectable now. Main gun damage is much better on it. Overall, P3 I feel like is in a very strong state considering its cost. It is still a, it's got lower hit points than other medium tanks, but with the vehicle upgrades, it brings it right up to par. So I think the P3 is in a very solid spot overall. We'll put it in the strong category here. The Stuka, I mean, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody. This thing is wildly overpowered right now. This is definitely the best artillery unit in the game at the moment. It does absolutely devastating damage to infantry and vehicles. And the Vet 1 having a mutually exclusive cooldown with the standard barrage makes this thing so oppressive. Being able to fire one barrage after another is just like, it's so punishing to play against. And I can imagine how terrorizing these things are in a team game setting for that reason as well. Because I'd imagine like players are pretty much always getting this thing. And if you're not, you're missing out, let me tell you. If you're opting for like the howitzer or the LEIG or something else like for your artillery over this, if you manage to get to tier 4, like this should be something that you plan to build either first or second. The wiping potential on this thing is unmatched. The AoE profile on it is exceptional. This is like I mentioned, like I don't know, I can't really overstate like how strong this unit is. And I can't really say a lot more about it, like how to use it. I mean, blow up everything in the area of effect. That's how you use it. Now, something important to do with these units especially is, for those of you that don't use shift commands, I would highly recommend it for artillery units especially. So what a shift command is when you are issuing a barrage order, make sure to follow up by holding shift and then reversing your artillery unit to another position so that you don't get counter barraged or ambushed by an opponent's vehicle that's kind of just waiting for an opportunity to dive you. By constantly repositioning these units, you will keep them the most safe. And obviously when you're paying such a high premium for these units, it's important to do so. I mean, if we crack open the unit card, is there anything really to add to the Stuka? I don't think so. Obviously gets all of the vehicle upgrade benefits from but like the fact that these barrages don't share a cooldown to me is crazy. I really think that the way to fix that is have this barrage, when you use this, just reduce the cooldown by like 25%, even 50%. But having them have different cooldowns to me is completely crazy and I think needs to be fixed. But I am happy with how this unit performs, honestly. Like I want to see more of the artillery performing in line with this. Like the whiz bang, for example. The power disparity between the whiz bang and this thing is just crazy, considering they're both late game rocket artillery choices. I would like to see the whiz bang brought up to be more like the Stuka. But I think the Stuka's in a good spot. It's really great at punishing blobs in the late game, and I love tools for that, and we need more of that. So really, really exceptional unit. Might be the best unit overall in the DAK roster. So if you're not building it today, would definitely recommend. The Panzer IV. DAK Panzer IV, not a ton to add here compared to the P3. It got a lot of the same buffs. Also benefits from the vehicle upgrades. The only thing missing from this Panzer IV versus the Wehrmacht Panzer IV is the skirts. It doesn't have access to skirts, so it's missing out on that armor. But with the health pool upgrades, it actually ends up with more health overall than the Wehrmacht Panzer IV. Not too much more to add here about this. But the Armored Reserves Call-in is decent. I don't really love that it comes with Assault Grenadiers, but it's also not crazy expensive. It's only 400 manpower, which isn't a lot more expensive than what you would regularly pay for a Panzer IV. So overall, Generally, if I'm going armored reserves and the game is very competitive and I'm a long way away from Tiger, this is usually my go-to option. Unless my opponent is really armor heavy, in which case I'll go for the double Stug option, which I also feel like is very strong. Now, the reason why I'm actually putting this in the strong category compared to like the Wehrmacht Stug, I think I also put the Wehrmacht Stug in the strong category, but like what I like about these ones is they come out at a much more appropriate time. Oftentimes, once you get these bad boys out, first of all, you've got two of them, which is great. They support each other really well. They make an excellent front line. And they come out when your opponent has a lot of vehicles already. And a lot of the times it's going to be like medium vehicles. So having these to back up your composition and the premium that you pay for them, they're only 400 manpower and 80 fuel, which means you're paying 200 manpower and 40 fuel each for the Stugs. So great value for this option. And I actually really love these in the late game. If I'm facing a lot of my opponent's armor and I can't afford a Tiger or I already have one, the Stugs are my next choice over like the P3 or the P4 Call-in. Because they're cheap, you get two of them, they scale really well, they have really great armor, they're great at dueling other medium tanks. So I'm a big fan of the Stug Call-in, especially for DAK. The main problem I feel like, and the main issue with like the Wehrmacht one, is it's like they almost come out too early and you can't get enough done with them. But these come out at the perfect time, and because you can call them in reactively, it's something that you can always adapt into your build as needed. That takes us to the Tiger. Tiger's definitely in the OP category. I mean, as for you know how the Tiger performs as a unit, like it is probably the second best heavy tank in the game next to the Pershing. Universally, it's got great speed, decent mobility, excellent damage on the main gun against infantry, very consistent performer against all vehicle types. It also has slightly more range than other heavy tanks. Let me pull it up here so you guys can see. Actually, I'll pull it into here. I'll actually highlight, this is the difference between the Pershing and the Tiger. You can see the Tiger actually has 5 range over the Pershing. So this is a very unique trait, and it's not just the DAK Tiger, the Wehrmacht Tiger also has this. I don't know if I brought it up. So it's a really nice aspect to the Tiger, the advanced gunnery optics. Giving it extra range is super, super nice. And really contributes to the strength of this unit. It allows you to fight from ranges where it's under a lot less threat from enemy anti-tank units and options. So I'm a huge fan of the Tiger, and with the upgrades, this thing just becomes an absolute beast compared to the Wehrmacht Tiger. Like the extra speed, the extra rotation rate, the health upgrades, access to smoke launchers, all that stuff is excellent on this this variant of the Tiger. And it is a staple of DAK compositions to my knowledge, especially in team games, unsurprisingly. So this is a very, very good unit, very good option. So there you have it. That is the essential vanilla roster for the DAK units. You can see lots of strong units, lots of great options. Now, using them, like I mentioned, it is very difficult because generally their units are more difficult to replace because you need to invest in those armory upgrades in order to scale into the late game. And obviously, if you're losing units and needing to replace them, it's going to take away your ability to do that and hurt your overall scaling, right? But yeah, overall, lots of really great, strong options. Average options, again, they're still average. Like you can still make do with a lot of these units. And then not a huge fan of the early 250 and the LEIG in their current state. They need some buffs or some changes. I know like it's kind of delicate to touch the base 250 without the armor upgrade, because if you buff the armor up too much, it becomes a huge pain in the ass and too difficult to deal with. And it also throws off the delicate balance of the ultralights right now between the Dingo, the Jeep, and the 250. So I know it's kind of in a weird place, but Relic has a little bit more work to do, I think, to make the early 250 a better, more valuable choice and less risky. It shouldn't really feel as risky as it does, in my opinion, to get this vehicle, but it does. So with that, we're going to pivot now into the battle groups. So we've got armor support, Italian combined arms, Italian infantry, espionage, and Panzerjaeger command. Starting off with the armored support battle group. This is probably like, we'll talk about stack ranking at the end. So you've got two trees here, support and air power and armored warfare. Generally speaking, I like superior fire drills, but both of these options are decent. You can see 30% increase to penetration for effective unit. If you're facing a lot of like armor or anticipating a lot of armor from your opponent, like heavy armor, this can be a really, really great option to help your vehicles deal with it. If you're also planning to not build many vehicles that have coaxial machine guns or hull machine guns like the Stug or the Panzer IIIs or what have you, if you're planning on playing, say, like, I don't know, AT gun and flak or team weapon and Flakvierling heavy, maybe this is a better option, because the penetration is also going to help the Flakvierling a little bit. But remember, this is exclusive to vehicle units, so your team weapons are not going to benefit from the 30% penetration. But yeah, superior fire drills I tend to favor. The extra lethality on machine guns is really nice, and especially with the buffs to the machine guns on the hulls and the coaxials on the tanks, this can be quite strong now. It can make the P3s pretty scary, especially P3 swarm. Here you also have the Flampanzer. This is a really solid call-in at the moment. It feels like it comes in a little bit late, but this is a great augment to compositions that already include something like the Stug D, because the Stug D is going to deal some great chip damage to units, and then having the consistency of the Flampanzer to kind of like prevent units from closing in or wanting to close in on the Stug D, to get closer to penetrate its armor. The Flampanzer is perfect for dealing with those because it's just going to blast anything that's coming in and deal really consistent damage, and it can also chase units down a lot better than like a Stug can. So I really like weaving this thing into my Stug builds as kind of like a augment to support the anti-infantry capabilities. Then you have Command Panzer IV and Battlefield Salvage. Generally, I lean towards Command Panzer IV. I mean, this has some great utility options in it. I'm actually going to crack the unit card open here so we can look at them. The Armored Leadership passive on it is really nice. This, when combined with the Tiger, makes the Tiger an absolute menace, because it increases the armor of the Tiger, which makes it much harder to penetrate, and it also gives the rate of fire bonus. So this thing is really, really nice woven into your other vehicle compositions. And generally, I think just much better than Battlefield Salvage. I find this ability to be really situational. It's probably good maybe in like a team game setting where you're anticipating on taking some casualties and you want to convert that into a momentum, dealing some like a large number of casualties, and you want to build that into some momentum. But oftentimes I feel like when you're getting the most out of this ability, it's almost like you've already kind of won the game at that point anyways. And so for that reason, generally I'm going for the Command Panzer IV tank. This thing also woven into like a tier 2.5 heavy build is also very nice. Because again, the armor bonuses, the rate of fire bonuses all benefit all of those tier 2 units as well. Air support and power. Vehicle awareness I'm pretty much never using now. I feel like the 254 pretty much covers this, and so there isn't really like a situation where you would need to use this, where you would, I don't know, want to pay for it, I guess. I much prefer the salvage kits. Salvage kits on your infantry units is really nice because you may not have to build that recovery vehicle in order to salvage. And in the early game, this can convert into like losses and also like casualties inflicted on your opponent into bigger resource advantages, which is really nice. And the fact that you can salvage like your bikes, your 250s for extra manpower is also really nice. Panzerstorm, highly underrated ability, I think. The immunity to engine criticals is just bananas in combination with the speed and acceleration that the vehicles get. This is really like if you're planning an all-in push, you have to save some munitions for this ability, because the immunity to snares, to mines, like all that stuff, it's going to allow you to get in and behind your opponent like you probably want to if you're executing like a big P3 dive or something like that. This Panzerstorm is the Panzerstorm ability is just excellent. Probably only matched by like Breakthrough on the Blitzkrieg on the Axis side, because Blitzkrieg also gives rate of fire and makes targets more difficult to hit, which is really nice. But Panzerstorm, you know, great ability, great for cleaning up kills, for chasing things down, or just for capitalizing opportunities when looking for a big push. The air support abilities. Stuka dive bomb is excellent. It's just going to nuke anything that it lands on. It's kind of like a mini V1 in a way, except obviously there's smoke where it's going to drop, and you can hear it coming in, and the explosion isn't quite as big, and also isn't going to one-shot tanks. But it does deal very heavy damage, and it will immediately wipe team weapons or infantry units caught in its radius. So this is a very strong ability. Much prefer this over the current iteration of the Stuka anti-tank loiter. They nerfed this ability to the ground. I mean, they took its bonus damage against vehicles from 150% to 40%. So now they're doing about 150 damage per pass on both planes. So it's like 75 damage per plane. Just does not feel worth it at all to use this anymore. And it also doesn't pin a bit infantry that are near the vehicles that it's strafing, which it used to do, and that added a lot to its power. And now that is gone as well, there's really just like there's almost no reason to use this as far as I can tell. It's become pretty lackluster compared to what it was before. And I would argue, you know, now that the UK anti-tank loiter is in a much better place, maybe not bringing this back to what it was, but it needs some of the damage back, I think, in order to be justified as a something useful. So overall, this battle group, not my favorite, but definitely lots of strong tools, great augments to the DAK vehicle roster, and for that reason it goes into the strong category. We talked about the Panzer III. Generally, I feel like it's pretty strong. The P3 the Command P4 as a unit itself, I feel like is average in terms of its performance, but it's really its utility that pushes it into the strong category. But I am going to keep it in average because, you know, it comes out super late. I'm actually curious. I do want to compare side by side with Wehrmacht's Blitzkrieg or Breakthrough Battle Group, how late it comes out, because I think it might come out a little bit later, but I want to confirm that. Armor defensive, okay, this is 1 CP, 3 CP, so this is 6 total CPs in order to get to the Command Panzer IV, and I'm pretty sure this one is at least 7. This is 1, this is 5. Oh no, it's actually 8. Wow, okay, so this comes out super late. For the DAK, yeah, okay. I kind of like I've been feeling this in games as well, so now I'm not so surprised. Yeah, I feel like this comes out super late. I would like to see it accessible earlier. Maybe making this like a 1 CP or a 2 CP choice instead of 3 would probably make more sense. Because yeah, coming out at 8, I mean they are the same unit too. Like the DAK one and the Wehrmacht one are the same unit. So I think the DAK one should probably come out a little bit earlier, and because of its lateness, I'm going to put it in the average category. That takes us to Italian Combined Arms. So Italian Combined Arms. Now, I mean, I haven't seen this a lot in team games, but I have seen it a lot in 1v1s and 2v2 especially. The Bersaglieri's are exceptional. They have a long range damage profile. I want to show the difference between the Bursas and the what is it called? The Panzergrenadiers. Sorry, it's getting a little bit late here, so I'm losing my train of thought. Bersaglieri, Panzergrenadier. you can see here the Bersaglieri have a much better damage profile at long range. Okay, so you want to use these guys at long range ideally, especially against riflemen, and somewhat against sections. I would say against sections, I mean, they're going to be losing a lot of those trades against sections, but where these guys really come in super strong is in their numbers. Because of their mobility, you can move a lot more of them around at a time and just kind of outnumber your opponent in several different places at once. Their ability to capture territory really quickly because of their speed is excellent as well. And then the Bredas that they get access to later on are also very good. And then I think they have like probably one of the better anti-infantry grenades in this OTO Mod 35 grenade. The damage concentration on this grenade is really strong, so you don't want to be caught in it because it's a fast way to lose a unit, especially compared to like a steel hand grenade, which is a little bit less oppressive or less strong. But yeah, Bersaglieris, man, very respectable unit, and they don't have any kind of combined arms bonuses, so they can be used very well on like the fringes or alone in the early game when you're using them in cover. And this Ura ability is also very nice. So it makes them moves 80% faster. It makes the squad 10% harder to hit. And this is for the entire duration of the ability. So you don't actually need to be moving while you're using this. You could just use it when you're fighting a squad and it's close, and get the 10% harder to hit bonus that's going to usually like tilt those engagements in your favor a bit. When combined with the bonuses from veteran squad leaders, this unit is one of few that gets the damage resistance on it from veteran squad leaders, and that actually helps these guys scale a lot. It makes them scale really well against riflemen, not as well against sections, because sections are just crazy strong at long range. But they will perform better generally with veteran squad leaders. So don't think it's a waste because they don't get the extra man. You also get the extra bolster man for free from the CP unlocks, which we'll talk about in a second. But the damage resistance on them is really nice. It's going to reduce the number of casualties that you take throughout the game. Next. Oops. So we looked at the damage profile. So over here we've got Bersaglieri Bolster. I'd say if you're using Bersaglieri, this is probably the better choice. If you're not using Bersaglieri with this battle group, first of all, what are you doing? Secondly, this is probably the better choice: vehicle support or secure location. Increasing your capture and decapture speeds, and this actually stacks with the Panzergrenadier Vet 1, so it makes them capture and decapture territory like crazy fast, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, don't forget about this passive. If you don't like Bersaglieri but you like the rest of the battle group, you can do that. Bredas we kind of talked about a little bit when comparing them to the MG34 upgrade. The MG34 has more DPS, but the Bredas are better on the move. So if you're planning to be more aggressive, or whatever, like you can build these on the Bersaglieri, and you should, because they don't have access to the MG34, so this is the only weapon upgrade they get. But if you're thinking about like in a Panzergrenadier context, just ask yourself, like, are you being a lot more aggressive with the Panzergrenadier? Are you closing the gap a lot more? Or are you playing at long range? And if the answer is the latter, then you're going to want to go for the MG34. But if you're a lot more aggressive with your Panzergrenadiers, then the Breda might be a better choice. And it's also a little bit cheaper than the MG34. Force Recon, I mean, I don't really feel like these are competitive choices with each other. But this is okay. Extra vision range on your infantry is kind of nice. But if you have proper recon units, then this isn't really going to make a difference anyways. Over to the Italian armor and the Cima Vente specifically. Cima Vente's got a lot of buffs in the last patch. Transparently, I haven't tested this probably as much as I would like to. But I feel like it's in a much better state from the barrage side of things. It's much closer to like the American GMC, which is really nice, providing that extra utility to this unit that comes out a little bit later and is a little bit more expensive for the Call-in that it is. Weirdly, this unit has the same penetration at all range. It has 150 penetration no matter what range it's firing from, unlike other units that have better penetration as you get closer. I'm actually just going to crack it open so I can show you guys. Where's the gun? Can I look at the gun here? Yeah, look at this. Penetration is 150 at all ranges, which is kind of interesting. It does 120 damage, unlike other tank destroyers, which is a little bit less than like something like the Marder, but is in line with something like the GMC. So, you know, Cima Vente, not a bad option, especially if you're fighting a lot of early game light vehicles. And I would imagine, similar to like the GMCs, having a couple of these things in pairs to kind of support each other, but also use for barrages, probably a very good use in team game context, I would think. That takes us to the Carro Amato and the strafing run. The strafing run I'm not going to talk about because this thing is garbage. This is a waste of munitions, and it's not worth unlocking. You're way better off saving your munitions for artillery cover, which comes later. The strafing run just doesn't do enough damage to infantry or vehicles to justify using, especially for its very expensive cost. I mean, I think the US Loiter costs as much as this, which is ridiculous because it's way better. But don't use this. Like please, like don't. Save yourself, save your teammates. Don't use this. It's terrible. It looks really cool. I'll give you that. It looks really neat. I like how it looks. Cool visual effect, cool audio, but it's garbage. It doesn't do enough damage to infantry or vehicles to justify the cost. So I would never unlock this. I would always unlock the Carro, whether you're planning to use it or not, just so you save yourself from accidentally using this. That being said, speaking of the Carro is in a pretty good state. Really great like tempo vehicle for the mid game. Obviously, you want to build this thing as early as possible. You can see actually the cannon on it. It has a 0.85 moving accuracy multiplier, which is higher than average. Most vehicles have 0.75. Really respectable machine gun damage on this tank. Very, comparable to maybe like a Greyhound. It's probably better than a Greyhound, honestly. Yeah, it's definitely better than a Greyhound. But yeah, this vehicle's great. It's a great complement to like a Flakvierling based composition to help you transition into your late game or your tier 3. Getting one or two of these can be really, really good. Obviously, they are susceptible to anti-tank vehicles, and they will lose out to something like a Chaffee without the proper vehicle upgrades. This tank also has less damage than many other tanks. You can see it only does 80 damage per shot, which is pretty low for a tank. So if you compare that to something like a P3, which does 120, it does make up for it with like a pretty high rate of fire. But it is not going to trade super well with vehicles and also has very low penetration. Now, you can help the penetration and deal with some mid-game vehicles using the armor-piercing rounds. But for the most part, like, you don't really want to be using these things against heavy tanks. If you find yourself with them in the late game, probably the best thing that you could do is find an opportunity to get into your opponent's backline, try to wipe their infantry units, maybe kill some support units or team weapons or artillery, what have you, and then eventually build some better units, because swarms of these are not the danger that they once were, despite this passive bonus that it gets. And I did want to call this out. So when you have several Italian units, and this is all Italian units, so if you have Bersaglieri nearby, it also stacks, and it increases the reload speed so basically the rate of fire of the main gun is going to go up the more of the Italian units that you happen to have together. So overall, M13, not bad. Pretty good state overall for what it does. And then that takes us to the late game abilities. So looking at the late game abilities, you've got Pact of Steel, which reduces the cost of light vehicles by 15%, and artillery cover. Pact of Steel, not bad if you're planning to play super tier 2.5 heavy. It's also reduces the cost of the Stuka, which is kind of nice, or the medical truck. So if you happen to be losing those units and wanting to rebuild them, it can be useful. But I am much more preferable to the artillery cover. This ability is dangerous in the late game, especially. Might be one of the better DAK late game abilities. The barrages that come in this area are just devastating, and your opponent has to get out of it. So it's a great way to create space or ambush team weapons when you're launching an all-out attack. And frankly, the late game of this battle group really hinges a lot on this ability, because there's not a lot of late game benefit units or abilities in this battle group. It's mostly designed to help DAK create a really big advantage in the early game and a lot of momentum that they can carry into late game wins. And then you can finally, you know, help convert those late game wins and spend your munitions on artillery cover is a excellent choice, and way better than spending your munitions on the strafing run. That's why I always say unlock the Caro even if you're not going to build it, so that you can save your munitions for this. This is way better. So Italian Combined Arms is actually going to go in the OP class. In the context of 1v1s and small team games, the Bersaglieri are incredibly oppressive and allow DAK to create a ton of pressure and tempo in the early game. I might actually cast, I mean, I'll be honest, I've played a chunk of games with this battle group in 1v1s, in 2v2, well, not as much as 2v2s, mostly 1v1s. And most of my games are over in like 12 minutes, and that's the whole reason why I haven't uploaded a how-to for them yet. Because I was kind of waiting for a more competitive game, but like I've just been crushing opponents with this. Fergie also demonstrated this in his finals games against Hulk Smash using this battle group. He played Ray with this battle group and absolutely crushed him as well. This battle group is in a really good spot. And Bersaglieri is a big part of the reason for that. They don't scale as well as other Axis infantry, but because of their speed, their mobility, and their damage profile in the early game, they really help you catapult that advantage into a really strong, and you know, you can quickly convert on the win and win games in like under 15 minutes a lot of the time if you use these battle groups, this battle group and the Bersaglieri unit specifically correctly. Simavente, I'm kind of hesitating to put this in the strong category because I feel like I haven't used it enough to justify that. But I feel like with all the buffs it's received, the penetration bonuses that it's got now, and the barrage buffs, I feel like it's in a much better place, much more usable. So really happy with the unit overall. M13 I'm also going to put in the strong category for what it does. It is very effective, comes out at a great time, and handles all of its counterparts quite well. You know, the M13, for example, versus the Stuart, M13 is going to come out on top for sure, unless the Stuart is backed up. But in like a 1v1 situation, M13 is going to be the winner, and has really great anti-infantry damage profile, much better than something like the Greyhound or the Stuart. And is a great addition to like a mid-game composition to help you catapult into those late-game choices. Italian defense. So I've been playing with this battle group quite a bit over the last little bit. I'm trying to get a how-to up for it. I've got a game against Nostalgia that was pretty good, that showcased most of the tools in it that I really liked. So let's click over to that really quickly. But yeah, I've been practicing with this a fair bit. I kind of am getting used to, I feel like all the things in this battle group are pretty interesting for the most part, and have their uses, but is definitely outshined by some of the other battle groups that are just easier to execute with. So starting with defensive operations, or defensive warfare, I should say. Defensive operations is usually my go-to because it's a free unlock, and this ability a little bit more situational and probably much better in a team game context, where you have your forces generally more concentrated and you want to be defending points. But I have found really good uses for this in small team games and 1v1s as well. So these are definitely competitive options with each other, which I always like when the decision-making process is difficult between two things, because it means that their power level is like relatively even. But Teller mines, tank traps, and the HMG bunkers are quite good now with the new firing arc and their reduced cost. They don't have the bugged damage resistance that they had last patch, but they still do benefit from prepared positions, and it makes them a really beefy machine gun defensive option in the mid and late game. So really kind of like the synergy between these two. Sound the alarm, really great for defending key territory points. Bonuses to the infantry are really nice. The extra rate of fire and making the squads harder to hit, as well as increasing the capture time it takes to capture a point. Allows you to use this in a reactive manner to defend territory. So really big fan of Sound the Alarm. Booby traps, they're okay. I just feel like prepared positions is so much better and is a big part of the reason why I like this battle group so much, that I prefer it. The reduced damage and the extra vision range, and this also carries over to the emplacements as well. Prepared positions is excellent if you're planning on playing team weapon heavy, and this would be the one of the battle groups that you want to use if you're planning to use packs, for example, because it's going to make them a lot more durable and less susceptible to enemy artillery or getting flanked. Just the damage resistance is really, really nice on them. And then also the synergy that you get with the bunkers is also very good. And this also applies to the MG34 teams. It makes them quite beefy. And it opens up possibilities for you to make better use of the MG34s when you've got prepared positions. Propaganda War in Obice. Honestly, I feel like this ability is really outshined by the Terror Doctrine version with the airdrop one. Maybe still has a place and time to be used, but I generally prefer the Obice. I think most people do for its destructive power and late game potential. Much bigger fan of the Obice. On the field engineering side, we've got Guastatori. As a combat unit, I still don't feel like these guys are very good right now. Since the veterancy rework, they've kind of been struggling. I think they lost a lot of their combat bonuses that they had in veterancy before in the veterancy rework. So they're kind of in a weird spot from a combat perspective, but obviously the utility on them is really nice. The flamers, there are some maps that they're excellent on with the flamers. But certainly not every map, and probably not the open maps. I tend to prefer just building an extra Panzerpioneer rather than going for one of these guys because they're so expensive. Both Registered Artillery and L6 Combat Group, very great competitive options with each other. Registered Artillery is really, really nice for locking down a territory point that's under threat. Or using it on a highly contested area that you're defending. Love this ability. Very cheap, very spammable, and very effective for units that are in the territory point. When it comes to the L6, so I've actually broken the L6 into two categories, the Flamer variant and the Standard variant. I still feel like this combat group choice is quite strong. Definitely a good place for it. I'll talk about the L6 a little bit more when we get to the variants. And then last, we've got the Cannone, which comes with a truck. So generally when I'm using this battle group, what I've been doing is I'm beanie-lining it to the L6s first to create pressure and space. And if I can pick up a light vehicle kill with the L6 combo, with the autocannons, then usually at that point I'm converting at least one of them, if not both, into the Flamer variant. The Flamer variant of this tank is way better than the autocannon. Way better. Like crazy good. It's the same damage as the Flampanzer, but it comes out at 2 CPs, which is crazy. Your opponent's going to have way less to deal with this, and they have to prepare for it, because if they don't, like the speed of the L6s combined with the damage that they get, it makes the threat of running down and wiping squads way more prevalent. So I'm actually a really big fan of the L6 combat group. I feel like the autocannon variant after the first minute is honestly not very good. So I kind of put it in the bad category. It's very fragile. Basically there's a very tiny window to make use of the autocannon variant. It's when they hit the field. When they hit the field, you want to go and try to hunt down an opponent's light vehicle with them, or ultralight. And then you're going to want to convert them into the Flamer variant, because the Flamer variant, honestly, dude, it borders on OP. It is so good, especially if you can protect them. I have several games using this where just getting them scaled to Vet 3, they just become absolutely devastating to enemy infantry, even in the late game. So I think this is a highly, highly underrated unit, and I really like the performance of the L6 Flamer especially. Overall, this battle group, strong category for sure. Guastas, I'm feeling like they're very average at the moment. The defenses or the medical bunkers, I feel, or not the medical, the machine gun bunkers are very strong, especially with prepared positions. They are probably the best bunker unit in the game with prepared positions. So overall, this battle group in a really good position. Cannone, a little expensive, I feel like, but between the auto fire and the fact that it comes with a truck, what I like to do is try to make use of my 250 healing. And if I beeline it for the L6s and then go for the Cannone, I'm able to get to the Cannone with the truck within 5 CP, and it's a great like bargain for getting a heavy artillery piece and then a truck that you can convert into a medical truck at the 5 CP mark. So I'm going to put that in strong as well. Espionage. Espionage, I have mixed feelings about right now, dude. I don't really like how it's built right now. I feel like it's super cheesy. It comes with the worst cheese that DAK has, but there are some really awesome ideas in here that are kind of just buried in the cheese. The Funk Wagon, very cool unit. I really, really like the passives on it and the ability to capture territory, to lay mines. This unit has great utility, and I'm a huge fan of it. I don't really like the implementation of the camo mechanic on this battle group. I feel like it plays into the cheese like really badly. What is that? Oh, there we go. I see. Okay. Mobile demo charge. Yeah. But yeah, Funk Wagon, great unit. Obviously, you get access to that at the beginning. Incendiary anti-tank munitions. This is kind of, to me, it seems kind of be like a must-have. And this is the other augment that I was talking about. If you're planning on going AT guns, this can be a really nice choice because the burn damage is going to impact, especially the heavies, quite a bit. And so this would be an example of another battle group where you'd want to probably go for AT guns over something like a Marder or 88. Well, actually, 88's good too. But honestly, Pack 38 does the job enough with the incendiary munitions, even against the heavy tanks. It's good. Advanced ambush training is also very solid. It's a little bit outshined, I think, by the anti-tank munitions. But the ambush training is also really nice, especially if you're playing heavy into the cloak blob, which we're seeing a lot of. Operation Scorpion, nothing really to write home about with this ability. I generally so it camos your vehicles and makes them slower, and then revealed it gives them rate of fire. A lot of the time, I just trigger this when I'm fighting, like in combat, because I'm gonna get the rate of fire bonus anyways. It may trigger cloak for like a second, but like the speed debuff usually isn't worth it. So I usually just like trigger this when I'm fighting anyways. And then the refund is kind of nice on the vehicles because you can recoup some of your losses. And if you're about to lose something like a Tiger, I mean, just spending the munitions to get 25% of the cost of the Tiger back is going to help you get your way back into the game a lot more quickly. So this is an underrated ability overall, but kind of mediocre as well. Yeah, in a decent state, I would say. Intel Disruption versus Sector Subterfuge. I feel like both of these options are pretty strong right now. Intel Disruption, obviously, for detecting units and cloaking. And then Sector Subterfuge meant to steal resources. I imagine this is way more menacing in team games and a huge pain in the ass. So I don't envy you guys playing a lot of big team games with this. And then this is equally frustrating, I think. But it is a little bit more accessible, I guess you could say, to try to destroy and locate. So that's kind of nice about this. But both of these beacons pretty cool. Both fine options. Really depends on what you're prioritizing. Plunder versus transfer depots. I love this mechanic, dude. I think this is so cool. So here's a list of the options on what you plunder from whether you... I think what a lot of people miss on this is your weapon depends on the faction of the vehicle that you are plundering. Okay, so if you're plundering an allied vehicle, you're either going to get Bars, Thompsons, bazookas, or the 1919. And if you're plundering Axis vehicles, you're going to get the Breda, the STG, the Panzerbuska AT rifle, or the G43 scoped rifle. I will say, in most contexts, I feel like the Axis options are better for plundering, generally speaking. The Breda is probably, like, it has a better complementary damage profile for Panzer Grenadiers because it has decent long range damage over the bar. The bar is made more for short range. And the fact that you can pair this with an MG34 upgrade just makes these squads super strong. So I think the Breda is overall better. The STGs give a mid-range damage boost and short range. And then the Thompsons are pure short range damage boost. So whatever you're prioritizing with Assault Grenadiers, that's kind of what you want to go for. I tend to prefer the STGs because it helps me with the wiping squads on retreat because of the mid-range accuracy that they get. And also with the ambush bonus, the STGs get a little bit more of a window of opportunity because you don't have to completely close the gap to get used to the ambush bonus. So that's really nice. The bazooka versus the Panzerbuska AT rifle, they're kind of even. I mean, the bazooka does a little bit more damage, but the Panzerbuska has a little bit more consistency in hitting its target. But both are good options. 1919 is definitely better than the scoped rifle, but honestly, Panzerpioneer should be the last unit that you're salvaging weapons on. You should always do your Panzer Grenadiers, your Panzerjaegers, and your Assault Grenadiers first. Transfer depots, probably great in team games. I don't use them a ton in the small team games or 1v1s that I play. But I would imagine dropping this on like a munitions point is really nice. Munitions is definitely the better option because munitions have higher potential value because they have super high value points that are plus 16. And you also get munitions through your Funkwagon veterancy. So munitions is probably overall the better choice for putting your transfer depots down. But obviously, you know, it's going to depend on the game. Fuel points might make sense too. Disruption Operation and Firestorm, both of these abilities are pretty good. Both situational, I think. If your opponent's playing really team weapon heavy, Firestorm is probably better. Disruption Operation probably makes a bit more sense when you're conversing on like a choke point. And you are reducing the effectiveness of vehicles and infantry and team weapons in the area. This can be a really, really good choice when you're doing a big push. But both of these are kind of good options. The difference obviously being disruption operation is going to affect enemy vehicles as well. So keep that in mind. That's it for espionage. So overall, espionage, I think honestly, espionage is in the OP tier, especially when you maximize the cheese. We didn't talk about the Goliath. The Goliath is bad, dude. I really want this unit to be good, but the maneuverability on it is so bad right now. It's really impossible to get this into a good position to use it effectively. And the detector units kind of make this also very difficult to use. So I think if it was more like the COH3 version, like much more maneuverable, much easier to drive, then we could say that this could be a way better, more effective unit. But right now, like between its speed and poor maneuverability, it's way too easy to destroy these things from a distance. And the munitions investment is pretty much never worth it. So the Goliath is unfortunately bad. Would like to see them buffed. And then last but not least, we're getting to the new Panzerjaeger Command battle group. I thought that I really wasn't going to like this because I was like, man, DAK doesn't really have a problem with dealing with tanks. They have more problems with infantry. But after using it, I have changed my mind. I think this is everything that DAK needs in it. So start with minefields. This is the better choice. This is straight up just the more competitive choice. Way, way better. S-mines are terrifying. Three patches of S-mines will borderline wipe a squad. 4 will do it. 4 will definitely do it. And the fact that you don't have to plant the entire minefield is really nice. You know what? I'm literally just going to load up the game so I can show you guys because I feel like there's a good chunk of newer players that are not going to recognize or understand how to execute this. So I'm going to load up the game in the background. Blockade equipment is fine. I just think it's far less competitive and way more niche than minefields. Minefields are going to be the much more competitive option. Okay, just give me a second here. So with S-mines, when it comes to S-mines specifically, when you are placing them, you can lay some of the patch and not the whole thing, and get your munitions that you didn't spend refunded to you, which is really nice. So how you do this is when you've selected mines, you see it shows you the 9 patches here. So what you want to do is you just start your patches. And then once you've planted like 3 or 4, that is actually enough to like majorly damage a squad in an area. So you'll notice now, if I right click away, I only actually ended up spending 20 munitions because it's 5 munitions per S-mine patch that you lay down. And this is all you need to like totally kill a squad that's walking by. Here, watch this. Oh. Wait, why are we dealing no damage to ourselves? Well, that was super weird. Okay, hold on. Let's try this again. Maybe it was the suppression? That was really weird. Here, I'll plant... No, we'll do a rifleman squad. I want to showcase these. I think there's a good chunk of people that haven't seen these. They are absolutely devastating. So here, let's do production. We've planted all those. Cool. Now we will delete this, and then we'll walk this guy in to the S-mines, dude. Look at these. Oh my gosh, that was 3! 3 mines! I wiped the whole squad with 3 mines, dude. Like, look at that. That's insane. So yeah, I think I kind of made my point there. So you only need to plant 3 at a time. You can plant them everywhere. They're crazy. And they're super oppressive. Really great anti-infantry mine. So yeah, S-mines and Regal mines. Oh my gosh, Regal mines. Like, we haven't even talked about Regal mines. Regal mines will one-shot any light vehicle. They are different from Teller mines in that Teller mines, they both cause heavy engine damage, but Regal mines do 500 damage and Teller mines do 400 damage. Teller mines, usually when an opponent hits them, you need to follow up with something to finish it off, but Regal mines will just kill the vehicle. Anything all the way up to a Stuart or a Chaffee or a Greyhound, the highest like tier of light vehicle the Allies have, it will one-shot them. If it doesn't one-shot kill them, I mean, it will to those vehicles, but to medium vehicles that hit it, causes heavy engine damage, makes them borderline immobile. So really, really powerful mine, and Panzer Pioneers can plant it. The only other way to access the Regal mine is through the 251 for the Wehrmacht. You can build it through the 251. So it's a really powerful mine. Very handy to have. Next, we've got early warning in defensive positions. Generally, I feel like defensive positions is just better. Being able to get combined arms bonuses, whether your vehicles are around or not, is really nice. You just have to make sure that you're in friendly territory and cover. And defensive positions, really, really great ability. Early warning, not bad. Probably good if you're planning to like play big team games. Having at least one player with this is really nice to get the extra vision range. And designating a territory to have the even more vision range is also really nice. But in general, defensive positions, more competitive choice. Butterfly bombs, I'm sure you guys have seen. These can be really frustrating to deal with. Cheeky way to use them. I'm not even going to say it. I mean, well, I'm just going to say it because Relic needs to fix it. You can drop these in the fog of war, which means that if you force your opponent to do a big retreat, you can actually drop these in their retreat path. And as they run back to base, their units will take damage from them and potentially die, which is pretty cheesy and pretty annoying to fight. And I mean, also just dropping these to like buy time and like deter your opponents, slow them down is also a really nice way to use them. So yeah, the very, very handy mine drop ability. Tank busters. All right. So this, I'm going to talk, when we go back to the tier list screen, I'm going to talk about Panzerjaegers in the context of tank busters. And these guys are freaking awesome. They are so good. They're probably too good, honestly. They're probably too good. Combined with the Panzerjaeger veterancy progression, added the Panzerschreck in, and then the grenade assault ability, these guys are just so insanely good. They are the probably like the best. Yeah, they are the best anti-tank infantry in the game, bar none. And with veterancy, the extra range that the Panzerschreck gets in the late game is amazing. Along with the extra damage and the ambush bonus, like these guys get totally crazy in the late game at Vet 3. So keeping them alive is a total priority. And for that reason, I think it kind of outshines the GRB grenade launcher requisition. This is a cool ability, but I do think like it loses its effectiveness after a pretty short time. Like it's pretty decent in the early game, but after that, I just feel like it's not really very good. So yeah, I tend to favor the tank busters, much more competitive option. Crew shock tactics, I think this is a heavily underused ability from what I've seen. Using this to set up for kills when you're going for shots with your tank busters or any vehicles that have a cannon, whether it be a Marder, P3, Tiger, whatever. Really excellent ability to lock down an individual target and kill it. So a big fan of this, and very cheap and spammable, which is nice too. Then we've got the Elephant. The Elephant is in a weird spot. To put it simply, I feel like what the Elephant needs is maybe a little bit of extra damage against vehicles. More consistent penetration would be nice. Because what I'm hearing and seeing is that this thing is proving to be a liability a lot of the time, where you could just build Martyrs that are much more mobile and build several of them over the Elephant. So I think like maybe something like extra damage for the Elephant might make a little bit more sense, where it hits a little bit harder enemy tanks and more consistently penetrates. Right now, just for the investment, it's probably a bit too much. And I know for that reason, people tend to favor anti-tank Overwatch. And this ability is exceptional as well. Whether your opponent is blobbing his tanks or diving you with a heavy tank and you manage to get a snare off, this ability is an exceptional deterrent and a great follow-up to whatever other forces you have in the area to deal with an armored push or to execute your own anti-armored push. This ability is great. So Panzerjaeger Command Battle Group, definitely in the S tier, definitely in the OP tier. For 1v1s and for team games. We'll say caveat for Espionage is I feel like it is probably not OP in 1v1s. In team games, I'm sure it's very, very good. Very, very strong. Panzerjaeger, Tank Busters specifically, OP for sure. Exceptional. Elephant, going into the average category. The Truck and the Goliath. I mean, Truck is nothing. Goliath, we already talked about. So there you have it, guys. There is our tier list for all of the units. I am going to talk through the Armory really quickly, just to talk about the upgrades and kind of break those down. So advanced field repairs, I feel like this is an underrated ability, and having all of your squads be able to repair faster, especially in the late game, is really nice. I'm not usually getting this early, but it is nice. Combat half-tracks, if you're playing with 250s, this is a must-have. You have to get this. If you don't get this and you're trying to play with half-tracks, you're a masochist. You're a crazy person. I don't know what you're doing. Rapid advance. So generally, the order that I'm going for my my tech options, if I'm going 250s, then combat half-tracks is first. If not, vehicle survival package has to go first. The smoke combined with the little bit of extra health is the difference between keeping and losing your vehicles, and you need to keep your vehicles as DAK. Then generally, if I'm playing infantry heavy, I'll go veteran squad leaders. If I don't have a lot of infantry, I won't bother with this. But this is obviously really nice. The veterancy gain, the reduced damage, and then the extra man on the Panzergrenadier squads is really nice. Then generally, we're going into emergency repair kits after our first or our second later game vehicle, whether it's tier 2.5 or tier 3. This is going to help you maximize the uptime on your vehicles by allowing them to repair out of combat and giving them a little extra durability. Then we've got tungsten core and advanced optics. It's funny that these are at the bottom because I never get these. These are the last ones that I get. These are luxury items. I'm not usually getting these. We talked about how like armored support penetration and tungsten core kind of overlap with each other. So not really worth like getting this. If you really need penetration, you're concerned about it, going armored support's not a bad idea. But generally, like most of the DAK vehicle roster has decent enough penetration that you don't really need this unless you're going P3s and you're planning on diving like a bunch of Churchills, then maybe. But yeah, generally getting these last after I'm pop capped and have nothing else to spend my manpower on. For the most part, after emergency repair kits, I'm going for rapid advance. This is super underrated tech, really good. The extra speed applies to all your vehicles, as well as rotation rate is really nice for things like the Marder. So I'm a big fan of rapid advance. And then obviously the ability to capture territory with vehicles is going to help a lot as well. So that's kind of the overview of the armory upgrades. It kind of showed you like the order at which I'm getting them. And we'll go back to the tier list here and look at these. I mean, you know, DAK, great distribution of units. Generally speaking, most of the units are in the useful or strong category. Lots of OP options to really lean on and lean into. And I think that's contributing to why their win ratio is so strong on this patch. If I could get you guys to take away 3 things from this video, one would be don't forget to utilize your infantry and bark passives. They are so good. On your assault grenadiers, on your panzer grenadiers, you're going to get way more out of those units by using those. The second thing is prioritize survival with your DAK units. Other factions are much more forgiving when it comes to losing units. DAK is not. DAK really struggles if you start to lose units, and so keeping them alive needs to be the priority. And if you're considering whether trading a vehicle for killing an opponent's vehicle is worth it, most of the time the answer is no. And then the last thing, I would say, like, don't forget to prioritize your vehicle upgrades. Make sure to leverage the OP units that in each category. And, you know, diversify your playstyle. Try these different battle groups. Experiment. More how-tos. Lots of DAK how-tos coming down the pipeline. I know the only one that I've got right now is for Espionage, so don't worry. I am working on it. I am playing games with DAK. And I will be putting up some how-tos for these very soon. So with that, oh, we didn't quite break the time for the American one. How about that? Yeah, we'll leave it at that. So thanks everybody for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, please subscribe if you like this kind of content and would like to see more. Let me know what else you would like to see from the channel, and I'll see you nerds later.